Ready?
Smith.
No?
So for
Give some audio, some sound.
it's on there. There we go. Excuse me, for all of you filling out speaker slips, if you are donating time, do not turn in the speaker slip. You need to put the people's names for the person speaking. So if I'm speaking, I would put Kathy Hollywood here, and then under number 1 and 2, those are the names of the individuals that are donating time. That just avoids duplication, and then we're going to call you to speak.
And we're going to get started here as soon as she cues things up here.
We're ready to go.
Kathy, do I need to do a pink slip if
You're the appellant.
I share the time with the applicant and the lawyer gets up?
Okay, let's get started. Let's let her finish up what, yep, you ready? Okay. I'm calling to order this regular meeting of the Encinitas City Council for Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023, and it is 6:03 p.m. And I would like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Blackwell?
I'm here.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Hensy is absent. Deputy Mayor Lyons?
Here.
And Mayor Krantz.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the city council are present this evening with the exception of Councilmember Hensy.
Okay, thank you. And if you'd all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we've been through a couple hours of meeting here. We had a discussion about our homeless action plan that started at 4 o'clock. So here we are into the 6 o'clock regular meeting. And our first item of business is going to be 2 special presentations and proclamations. So I'm going to head over there and make those. Okay. I have never made it a secret that one of the things that I appreciate most about growing up in Encinitas is being a student at San Diego High School. It was known as No Hassle High back then, and it was a great place to learn. I have managed to keep in touch with the school through my 3 children having attended what is now known as San Diego Academy. But that has not made my love for the school any less, that it changed its name on us. I continue to be actively involved in an all-class reunion every year, and it's a lot of fun. As a parent of students that went to San Diego Academy, I experienced firsthand the change that took place from between when I was a student there and when they were, which is that the resources that went into education when I was growing up they went a lot further. So when I had extracurricular activities that I wanted to engage in, it was paid for. My parents didn't have to come up with any extra money in order for me to do that. And it was important in our household because my father was the only breadwinner, and he was a school teacher, and there were 7 of us kids. So it was very important that he didn't have that obligation in order to keep us active in extracurricular activities. So fast forward to today, it's not like that anymore. Extracurriculars have some significant costs. We happen to live in a fairly affluent community, so many of those costs are paid for by parents. But there are some students who attend San Diego Academy High School that can't afford that. And fortunately, what we have at San Diego Academy is a foundation that is dedicated to making access to those sorts of activities possible for everybody. They resource a lot of things, this foundation, and it's a really important role that the foundation plays. And tonight, this first proclamation is going to be awarded to Leslie Colchin Saldana, and I'd like for you to come up, please. Thank you. Leslie has been the leader of the foundation for the last 10 years, and her leadership has been instrumental in making sure that the foundation's mission was met, and she did it very well. So I'm going to read this proclamation and then give her a minute to say a few things if she'd like to. Whereas Leslie Colchin Saldana, a dedicated and passionate individual, first graced the San Diego campus as a student in the fall of 1980, embarking on a journey that would leave an everlasting impact on the school community. And whereas, after 28 years, Leslie returned to the campus as a proud parent of triplet sons in 2012, demonstrating her unwavering commitment to education and her love for San Diego Academy. And whereas, for the past decade, Leslie has tirelessly devoted herself to the San Diego Academy Foundation, showcasing exemplary leadership and dedication. And whereas, during her tenure, Leslie has extended warmth and hospitality to thousands of San Diego Academy students, making each of them feel welcome, appreciated, and seen. And whereas Leslie has not only been an outstanding alumna, continuously cheering on the Mustangs with her signature Go Mustangs, but has also played a crucial role behind the scenes by sharing her expertise as the executive director of the Alumni Association and contributing her extensive knowledge of San Diego's history. And whereas Leslie's dedication and love for the school have been instrumental in ensuring the success of numerous alumni events held on campus, fostering a strong sense of community and pride among past and present Mustangs, me. And whereas, as Leslie prepares to embark on new adventures, we collectively express our heartfelt gratitude and admiration for everything she has done. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Tony Kranz, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with the City Council members, do hereby extend our deepest gratitude and appreciation to Leslie for her exceptional leadership, unwavering commitment, and invaluable contributions to the community. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Kranz and council members. I'm humbled by the kind words and sentiments. I've been fortunate enough to have been in these chambers many times, mostly for Red Ribbon Week celebrations and recognitions, also with your generous grant program that's benefited so many nonprofits in our community. So this really is a treat for me. I've always maintained that San Diego is a special place, a place that brings people together and keeps us connected. Councilmember Ehlers, it was your lovely wife, Beth, who trained me in my first volunteer role with the SDA Foundation back in 2012. Councilmember Hinsey, who's not here tonight, we first connected when she was with the Leucadia 101 Main Street Association. And together, that organization has gifted over $10,000 to graduating seniors at San Diego. And Mayor Kranz, I have such respect for the deep roots in your community and appreciate your continued participation at our San Diego events. So once a Mustang, always a Mustang. Servant leadership is in my DNA. I'm the proud daughter of David and Ann Colchin. My mom served on the Carlsbad City Council for over 30 years. In fact, I was at Oakcrest when she was elected. Coach Kranz was my PE teacher, by the way, at the time. And Dad served on the Leucadia Wastewater Board until his passing a few years ago. And I'm so proud that my husband, Rolando, was appointed to fill his position and is serving as a director. As was mentioned, I first walked onto the campus of San Diego High School in the fall of 1980 and was lucky enough to come back. I've always believed in the mission of the SDA Foundation, which is enriching every student's experience while they're at San Diego, and I've just been so fortunate to work with so many incredible faculty, staff, students, parents, alumni, especially those parents that give so generously of their time and talent and treasure. I'm also extremely grateful for the two amazing women who preceded me, Sheila Durkin, the Foundation's founding executive director, and Bonnie Wren, its inaugural alumni coordinator. These two women worked so hard to build a foundation the framework that was based on transparency and collaboration and commitment to all San Diego parents and families. So San Diego is a special place for almost 90 years, and I feel so fortunate to have been here for such a small part of it. So thank you for this recognition, and go Mustangs.
Thank you. And I believe there may be some flowers as part of this. You want to come on up and present those? Yes. Okay. And Nanette and Monica are very involved with the foundation as well. And Sarah Everest, I think you took over, right? I did. Well, best luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's no easy way to make this segue because there's a lot of joy that came with presenting that proclamation. There is no joy with this particular proclamation. It is a proclamation that I will be giving to Jennifer Haskett. Come on up. And it is to acknowledge the impact of drug overdoses. And hello there. It's very painful to think about all of the lives that we've lost due to drug overdoses. We've seen an uptick, significant increase with the opioid crisis, and having lost friends, having seen park benches dedicated to young people who lost their lives to this scourge is very difficult to deal with. But I'm going to read this proclamation. Whereas the impact of drug overdoses affects millions of lives across the globe, causing immense sorrow and loss to families and communities worldwide. And whereas raising awareness about drug overdose prevention, treatment, and support is crucial in combating this global health crisis and promoting well-being among individuals affected by substance use disorders. And whereas acknowledging the significance of International Overdose Awareness Day as a vital initiative in promoting education, empathy, and advocacy for those facing drug-related challenges. And whereas recognizing the importance of working collaboratively with international partners, governments, non-governmental organizations, healthcare providers, and communities to address the underlying factors contributing to drug overdoses and to provide support to those affected by these tragedies. And whereas understanding that a comprehensive approach, including harm reduction, access to treatment, mental health support, and reducing the stigma surrounding substance use disorders is essential to combat the overdose crisis. Whereas the Addiction Awareness Initiative is hosting its 4th annual community event in conjunction with International Overdose Awareness Day on August 27th, 2023 at San Diego Park, providing an opportunity for individuals, families, and communities to come together to remember those lost to opioid overdose, share stories of recovery, and reinforce the need for continued awareness and action. And whereas the recent court settlement has granted San Diego $40 million over the next 18 years, emphasizing the urgency to address the opioid crisis and allocate these funds towards initiatives that focus on prevention, treatment, education, and support. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Tony Kranz, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with all the City Council members, do hereby proclaim August 31, 2023 as International Overdose Awareness Day. I call upon individuals, organizations, and communities worldwide to observe this day by raising awareness of the prevalence of drug overdose and its impact on families and communities. Yes, please be aware, do what you can to reduce the stigma. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to speak? Okay.
First and foremost, I want to say that out of the 13 cities in North County that we approached to make a proclamation, it was the mayor of Encinitas and this council that stepped forward to bring awareness about overdose and drug use. Oceanside is a close second, but Encinitas stepped forward right away. I am here tonight in honor of my son, Alex Nava, who was 24 years old when he died of an overdose. I lived 30 years in this city. I raised my kids. I was PTA president. We did all the right things. And I'm here tonight with a message to all the families in Encinitas to guard against the poisoning of our drug supply. Support your first responders. They see this every day, multiple times a day. Don't think that it can't happen to your family. It is a disease. It is an emergency, and it should be treated as such. The isolation and the stigma around addiction and drug use only hurts and kills people. So please, carry Narcan. You don't know when you're gonna need it. Know how to use it and administer it. If you don't know, ask a first responder. Come to our event on Sunday. Reach out to multiple agencies that are distributing Narcan over the counter. Make sure your high school kids know how to use it. Make sure your person that's in recovery, that's an addict, has it on them. Make sure their friends know, their employers know. It is critical to save lives so they have another chance to be with us. And thank you so much for bringing this important awareness.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, thank you to everybody. And with that, we'll move on to oral communications.
So Mayor, we do have 5. And just a reminder to the speakers under oral communications, this is to address the council on items that are not listed on the agenda. Our first 3 speakers are Michael George, Dolores Welty, and then Ellen Burr.
Good evening, council members, mayor. This is tough to follow that. I was a teacher for 50 years. Okay. I'm here to talk to you about the park that Encinitas forgot, Oak Crest Park. Have any of you been there? Okay. Well, there's a couple of things about Oak Crest Park that maybe you're not aware of. I don't know if you use it or not. But first thing is, I noticed that in most of the parks in Encinitas, there's covering, that, like those shades up there that you see in the back there, that cover the play area where kids play. We have a tot lot that's from like 2 to 4, and another area that's like 4 to 6 or 8 or 10, I forget what it is. Anyway, it's wide open to the sun. So I always wondered, why don't we have those shades like over Oak Crest Park, like the other parks? And it don't seem to be able to get an answer that makes any sense to me. Remember, Mayor Kranz, it's called public education. It was funded by the people, okay? We got a park here where we have little kids playing there all the time. The surface is this rubberized thing, and when the sun is on it, it's really hot. So I think maybe if we have some money in the budget, we could put some shades up there for the kids. And then I'd like you to take a field trip to the restrooms there. Okay? I know It's got a little laugh back there. Well, they are in need of repair. Maybe even torn down and redone or something, you know, I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but something should be done because they're not in really great shape. They don't really reflect very well on our community. I know I use them. And the last thing I like to say is you have a thankless job. And I know. But, you know, that's the cards you were dealt, and you got to deal with them the way, you know, it comes down the pike. So I know you're here to hear a lot of complaints, but I want to thank you for the service that you do, okay? I think it's very important to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Krantz and City Council. It's always a pleasure to come here and speak with you. I'm Dolores Welty, 2076 Sheridan Road in Encinitas, Leucadia section. And tonight, I'm here to represent Save Our Bluffs, a 501c3 foundation with the mission of protecting and preserving natural open space in Encinitas. We applaud the city's purchase of Surfers Point. We're very pleased and very happy about it, and we thank you very much. We also encourage you to continue this policy of acquiring and safeguarding open space and caring for parks. To that end, we want to bring forward once again the city's earlier interest in purchasing the Murphy South Bluff, right there, fronting Bataquitas Lagoon at I-5 and La Costa. This bluff, known as the Gateway of Encinitas on Google Maps, has been designated critical southern maritime chaparral and San Diegan coastal sage grub habitat, housing many rare, threatened, and endangered species. It has been pursued and coveted by wildlife agencies, the Bataquitas Lagoon Foundation, and local citizens for more than 30 years, 3+ decades. It is the final parcel needed to complete the Bataquitas Lagoon Ecological Reserve. You and we know that the city is already involved in this goal of acquisition because the city paid for the appraisal. And we thank you very much for that. At that time, the property became involved in a bankruptcy suit. Couldn't buy it. It's out now and held by a realtor. Save Our Bluffs has continued to work with state and national agencies toward acquiring the bluff. Currently, the Wildlife Conservation Board invited us to make a proposal for purchase, but the board is seeking a municipal partner to join in making an offer for this bluff. We would like to meet with you in the near future to discuss this exciting opportunity and explore ways to make the purchase happen for our community, for our future, for the beauty of our city. Thank you.
Next, excuse me, next speaker
I hate to have to use
is,
my gavel, Dolores. You don't only egg them on there.
next speaker is Ellen Burr, followed by Terry Ann Skelly, and then James Bailey.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. 3 quick things. I'm still looking forward to a report on the EDCO Green Waste Recycling Program. Something not anecdotal, anytime would be good. One of the last meetings, the city manager essentially noticed that they were going to be starting the new academy, and had a recommendation that perhaps some commission members and maybe council members might avail themselves of that opportunity. I think a better idea would be to create a public service running on a loop on our station, taping maybe the next academy, where anyone can tune in and watch it, and maybe once a year, once a quarter, questions and comments that could have been submitted will be answered, and maybe once a year have an open town hall where any questions, the majority of misunderstood questions, could be answered about the academy. Why reinvent this wheel every time you're going to do it? Although I can understand if you reorganize, that's a good thing to do. And as part of that, it's my understanding, there was a light brush on affordable housing in the academy program. And this is a tiny little tip of the tail wagging the dog that is the size of not Bluey, but Clifford. So it would be very good, I think, if there was a presentation to the entire public totally explaining how the affordable housing impacts work and the requirements of them, and maybe exactly what that means and how much the actual cost is, not just socially, not just environmentally, but actually physical dollar accounts, so that maybe we can figure out a better way to do this in the future. Thank you.
Good evening, Encinitas City Council, Mayor Krantz. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. I'm a parent and public health educator with San Diego Alliance for Drug-Free Youth. San Diego Alliance wanted to share some good news regarding smoke-free policies around our region. Last night, at Carlsbad City Council, the City Council voted to direct staff to develop a complete smoking prohibition in multifamily housing units and outdoor common areas and return it to the City Council for consideration. Since Encinitas is a leader in tobacco policies, we wondered if our City Council would consider a smoke-free, vape-free, multi-unit housing complex ordinance as well. Perhaps the City Council could ask the Environmental Commission or the new Public Health and Safety Commission to consider it. I am reminded that death and disease caused by products that are smoked and vaped are still the leading cause of death and preventable disease in this country. And for minority communities who disproportionately live in multi-unit housing complexes, poor air quality has been devastating. My research has found that it is estimated that 10% of the population has a strong allergic reaction to tobacco and marijuana smoke and smell. This is more than an annoyance. It is a painful and alarming health hazard. And for countless others, it's a very uncomfortable nuisance. American Heart reminds us, and I quote, inhaling tobacco and marijuana smoke has been associated with heart muscle dysfunction, chest pain, heart attacks, heart rhythm disturbances, sudden cardiac death, and other serious cardiovascular conditions. Inhaling tobacco and marijuana has been shown to increase the concentration of poisonous carbon monoxide and tar in the blood, end quote. I would like to suggest that the elimination of secondhand tobacco smoke and vape from spaces where residents live improves the quality of life for everyone immensely, especially for the young, the old, those with compromised health, and communities of color. Poor health costs money and depletes public health and medical resources. Now would be the best time for our city to consider a ban of marijuana and tobacco smoking and vaping in shared spaces where residents' poor health choices to smoke and vape severely affects the health of our neighbors. Thank you for hearing my concerns.
James Bailey.
Thank you for your time. I'm here to talk about the property at the end of Clark that's owned by Western National Properties. Since living in San Diego for almost 20 years now, I've always heard about having a defensible space, especially during fire season and throughout the year. This is not a defensible space. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is all kindling, and this brown at the bottom is my neighbor's fence line. I'm one house over from them. Have you seen can of gasoline? This is next to that. I'm trying to upload pictures to the council. When I tried to do it, the files were too big. I'm going to try and get them on there. This was Monday night, 2 nights ago.
You could put them on that thing.
Okay, yeah. This is what the fence line looks like.
Sir, leave your pictures with him and come back over to the microphone.
Thank you. That was around 9 o'clock on Monday. Thankfully, the fire picture. Or the next picture. Yeah, that is also right on the other side of that gas tank, more dead vegetation right up against our property lines. And then Monday night, around 8:45, our neighbor went outside to let her dog out to go to the bathroom and noticed a fire. This, just on the other side of the fence. I was putting my son to sleep, and I get a ring on our doorbell that the house next door is on fire. Me and my neighbor got out there with hoses trying to do what we could before the fire department arrived. This was a blaze. I mean, I have videos of hearing a palm tree explode into flames. This was not an accident. We also have video of a person coming out of this area, lighting stuff on fire and throwing them into the vegetation of our community. Thank God it rained on Sunday. This could have been a lot worse. We're begging you, please do something about this area. This is not done with. This person could come back. We call the sheriff every day that there's someone in this property, but they can't do anything about it because of squatters' rights. So I'm coming to you to please. I haven't slept since this happened because this person can come back at any time. This is scary. This is awful. This is a ticking time bomb to happen again. Please do something. This is a major corporation or bank or someone that owns this property that we can't even get a hold of.
Okay, I'm very sorry you had to experience that. And we do have departments
Thank you.
dedicated to these sort of nuisance issues, and so we will make sure that something gets done.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes oral communications.
Okay, thank you. We did not have a closed session today, so there is no report. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the posted agenda, and then moving on to the consent calendar, nothing has been removed by members of the public.
Okay, very good. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay?
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hinsey absent.
Okay, very good. So that takes us to item 10A, which is the only action item we have on our agenda tonight. And it is a continued, it's a continued hearing, continued public hearing to consider a timely filed appeal by the Encinitas Community Collective of the Planning Commission's approval of Lennar Homes, of California LLC's density bonus design review permit, condominium tentative map, and coastal development permit for the construction of a 149-unit townhome community. And I assume many of you were here when we first heard this. And I will say that at that meeting, I suggested that we continue this to have a chance to talk about an easement and the value of an easement that's on the corner of Plato Place and Piraeus Street. And it was after our meeting that night that the lawyers got together with us and basically laid out the fact that that easement could not be the conversation that we had prior to making a decision on the development itself. So we are looking at the project within the four corners of the law that has to do with this project. We do it in a quasi-judicial fashion with open minds and an obligation to follow the law. This particular issue, if you saw the staff report, there was a listing of the items that are going to be considered tonight, in addition to, as a result of our deliberations that night. And they have to do with, initially that night we talked about the proposed easement, but we have to take that off the table for tonight. And then there are the status of the staircase to the roof deck as a story, the date the application was deemed complete versus the date Coastal Commission approved the latest City of Encinitas design standards and guidelines, the location of the offsite 1.92 acre mitigation bank, the project utilizing the sand compatibility and opportunistic use program, which is known as SCOOP, and added conditions of approval for members of the public, and the overriding consideration findings required in the EIR. So tonight, your comments as you speak should be focused on those items that we are rehearing, that is a part of this rehearing. We've heard you speak last meeting to talk about other issues that are related to this project. But again, we're hearing these items that I just listed, and we're going to do that in the form of a public hearing. We did keep the public hearing open for the purpose of having an opportunity to speak to the issues that we addressed at our last meeting. So the procedures for the appeal hearing, continued appeal hearing, is we're going to have a staff report. We're going to ask council to disclose any other information they have received that is not included in the staff report. There will be preliminary questions from the council. Then we're going to have the appellant go first, which is with a 5-minute presentation. And we're going to have the applicant go next with a 5-minute presentation. We'll have public speakers that are focused on the issues that we are, that the continued hearing addressed. And then we're going to have a rebuttal by the applicant. We're going to have which will be 3 minutes. We'll have a rebuttal by the appellant for 3 minutes, and then we will close the public hearing and have council discussion and action. Are there any questions from my colleagues on any of that? Okay. With that, we will begin with the staff report. Anna.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and members of the public. Anna Kolomusi, presenting the continued appeal for Piraeus Point. This is continued from June 21st, 2023, regarding the appeal filed by Encinitas Community Collective. The City Council, as mentioned, requested staff return with additional information regarding these 7 points listed here, and I'll be presenting them on each slide. Beginning with the proposed easement, as mentioned, there's private improvements within the city-owned land along Piraeus and Plato Place. Just reiterating the modifications to the conditions of approval that were asked at the prior hearing, and the removal of special condition requiring the street vacation, which would not be the appropriate mechanism. So the next item is in regard to the roof deck staircase. Staff was asked to review the Portofino project that was before the Planning Commission a few years ago. And at that PC meeting, it was determined that if a staircase is open more than 50%, it shall count as a story. So therefore, given that interpretation, the Piraeus Point proposed staircases would constitute as an additional story. So in response to that, the applicant did request an additional waiver for the story for those locations, and they provided a density bonus supplement, which can be found in attachment 3 of the agenda report. There is a provision in the municipal code to allow projections of 5 feet above the height limit for elements such as elevator shafts and mechanical equipment and some other similar uses. So the city council could consider staircases as an allowable projection under this code provision. Pursuant to the Bankers Hill density bonus case law, it states that a city may not deny a project as designed unless specific findings can be made. I provided the findings here on the screen, and staff was unable to make the findings to deny the waiver, as providing an additional story was not found to have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety, and does not have a specific adverse impact on real property that's listed in the California Register of Historic Resources. The question was raised regarding the deemed submitted date pursuant to Government Code Section 65941.1, which does not allow a city to impose new standards on a project after that date, which for this project was February 3rd, 2022. And it was asked about the Coastal Commission approval date for the objective design standards, which was on June 9th, 2022. Therefore, those standards would apply specifically to this project. Project will impact 7.4 acres of habitat. The project proposes the 5.5 acres will be mitigated in the immediate adjacent properties. A question was asked regarding the location of the remaining 1.92 acres, and as documented in the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Program, Bio-7, it does indicate a condition in mitigation that states that both the City of Encinitas as well as the wildlife agencies have to approve that site prior to any construction permit being issued. A question was also raised in regard to the adjacent mitigation property ownership, and the applicant has indicated that it will be owned and managed by a qualified nonprofit entity in the business of owning and maintaining biological mitigation lands. The city does have an adopted SCOOP program, the Sand Compatibility and Opportunistic Use Program. It's in place in order to provide sand nourishment to our local beaches. All developments are subject to this program, and the applicant has expressed concerns about the process and timing that it could potentially delay the start of construction. At the May 18th, 2023 Planning Commission hearing, members of the public requested certain conditions of approval be added to this project. The applicant has agreed to provide conditions of approval, including language within its CC&Rs related to rooftop deck capacity, and as well as stating that the residents cannot park into the adjacent residential parking areas. In addition, the applicant has agreed to limit affordable units to be for sale only and not for rent. And as far as the traffic mitigation, the applicant supports the use of traffic mitigation fees to be used within the project vicinity. Lastly, the condition that was not included relates to dark skies. The community of Leucadia is not designated as a dark skies community. However, the Encinitas Municipal Code does have provisions of shielding and downward lighting within our code that the applicant is aware they need to comply with. The project will require environmental impact overriding considerations to be made, as the residents of the development will travel an additional distance of 7.6 miles and exceed that average daily VMT threshold by the 7.6 miles. Pursuant to the California Code of Regulations, the decision-making agency shall determine that a specific economic, legal, social, technological, or other benefits including region-wide or statewide environmental benefits of a proposed project, outweigh the unavoidable adverse environmental effect. At the council hearing, there was made reference to prior CEQA overriding consideration findings that were made, and there was a statement that those projects were supported because there was an additional benefit beyond what is required of them. However, we did want to state that overriding considerations are not related to benefits beyond standard requirements. Though those benefits can be utilized, other benefits including meeting housing element goals by providing affordable housing, can be a single benefit utilized to justify and support a determination that such benefit outweighs the unavoidable significant environmental impact. Since the last city council hearing, the applicant has continued consultation with outside wildlife agencies. And as a result, they're requesting some modifications to the conditions of approval that will allow flexibility in how to provide mitigation with the goal of providing the maximum amount on site. These modifications, they're found in attachment 4, and I'm happy to display them on the screen for further discussion if needed. The language modifications have been reviewed by fire, planning, and our CEQA consultant, and we are in support of those changes. In response to public comments received, staff preliminary analyzed the potential to add parking along Piraeus Street, as well as add a right turn pocket heading westbound on Plato Place going on to Piraeus Street. Staff determined that these improvements can be feasible. The City Council could consider adding a condition of approval to require these improvements along the project's frontage. The municipal code allows the city to require frontage improvements for major development subject to applicable zone standards. Public correspondence was received by Chatton Brown Law Group and Coastal Commission discussing LCP consistency and identifying potential ESHA. The applicant provided a response to the letters received via a memorandum, which was distributed and posted on the agenda online. The city's purview is to ensure project consistency with the city's adopted local coastal program. The city's LCP requires the identification, protection, and mitigation of sensitive habitat. The project is consistent with the goals and policies identified in the LCP, and staff continues to support the recommendation of approval of the project and the EIR. In response to the public correspondence and memo response, several sections of the EIR have been updated to provide clarification in relevant sections. Those also have been distributed and posted online. So no new impacts have been identified, and clarifying language does not change the conclusions of the EIR. I will pass it to Bob Stark with Michael Baker, who is our CEQA consultant, who can summarize some of those changes that were incorporated.
Thank you, Anna. I realize the replacement sections of the final EIR are quite lengthy. The responses to comments section alone is, I think, approaching 1,000 pages. So there is no real easy way to kind of Frankenstein this document back together without replacing those sections wholesale. But I want to assure you the depth and page count of those sections is not reflective of the changes to the EIR, which are actually very discrete. It's just there's domino effects where we change one thing here, we need to make sure it matches in the executive summary, et cetera, et cetera. So quickly, as Anna already mentioned, there is a revision, an addition to one of the biological mitigation measures to allow that additional flexibility with the applicant having meaningful collaboration with the wildlife agencies. Should there be another option besides securing the additional nearly 2 acres offsite if the wildlife agencies decide it may be better suited to do restoration at the project site and those environs, we wanted to allow that flexibility to not have to come back and make addendums and corrections to the EIR in the future. Similarly, with regard to the wildfire setbacks, we wanted to add some flexibility for deferral to the Encinitas Fire Department for their sign-off and buy-in to any final setback distances there. Finally, as Anna mentioned, there were 2 additional comment letters, obviously received well after the close of the public comment period, but the city wanted to make a good faith effort to respond to some of those concerns relayed in those letters. So those have been responded to and addended to the response to comments section. So in sum, with that response to comments section, you can basically flip all the way to the last couple pages of that very lengthy section. You will see that Chatton Brown letter and the Coastal Commission letter with the city's responses.
Okay, so before I move on to my recommendation to conclude my presentation, I would like to make note of one correction within the staff report. It can be found on page 4. It references providing 100% renewable energy. That was inadvertently placed in there. However, the project is doing all electric. They are doing solar. It just doesn't meet that 100% renewable energy definition. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. And the recommendation to City Council to adopt resolution number 2023-72 to deny the appeal and affirm the Planning Commission's decision. That would approve the project, certify the EIR, adopt the CEQA findings of fact and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and adopt the statement of overriding considerations, and then just a reference there of the modified additions and deletions of conditions of approval that were mentioned throughout the report. And that concludes our presentation, and we have staff available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. And it a little unusual to that the comment letter that we got from Chatton Brown Law Group created a situation where we received it essentially right when the staff report was going out. If the city attorney could please explain, I think all of us would owe in our disclosure that we did get some information outside that was not included in the staff report, which is this memo we received today. And can you speak to the disclosure, the need to disclose, and other, how this action was taken?
Certainly, these were all very, very late filed documents. The City Council has received those documents. Each member of the City Council received those documents. They're not included in the staff report because they arose after the staff report was published. However, these documents are available for public inspection as part of this hearing tonight.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will go to disclosure. Councilmember.
Are you want to do disclosures then?
Let's do disclosure first.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose other than what I disclosed at our prior meetings.
Yep.
Okay.
Nothing to disclose. So with that, we'll go to preliminary questions, which Councilman Raylers.
Yeah, and mine is about a little bit of information in this new memo. Several places it refers to the 1.92 acres being in Manchester Preserve. Is that the Manchester Preserve within Encinitas, and is that somehow committed, or is that part of the conditions of approval?
It's not committed. It's a desire of the applicant, but it's not committed at this time.
And we could somehow word that into a condition of approval if we get that far?
That it be required, well, it's not guaranteed that they'd
Highly
obtain it.
encouraged, I don't know, but that answers one of the questions I think I had last time, is where is that 1.92 acres? And I have a very strong preference to have it in Encinitas, closer to the project, the better.
Absolutely.
Deputy Mayor Lyons.
I think this will be an easy clarification, but I'm not sure. In the proposed modification to conditions, the one associated with the wildfire break, with the protection, the fire fuel break, are we saying in that condition that we're giving the authority to the fire department to review and approve the setbacks for the fire protection? I just want to clarify, that means we're saying that our own standards and also CAL FIRE standards are not going to be followed. We are instead of that, we're going to allow the authority to be with our fire department?
Standards will be followed. It's just that the fire department would have that final say should any modifications occur.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. I think that's good. Thank you.
Councilmember Blackwell.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about the SCOOP, or the Sand Compatibility and Opportunistic Use Program. Sand's on my mind as summer, coming into the local summer here in September, and we don't have enough in some areas of our town. But you mentioned the applicant is concerned about timing. Can you explain more what that means, please?
Yes, the soil needs to be tested and reviewed by the state agencies prior to allowing the sand to be placed on our local beaches, and that process can take up to 3 to 4 months.
Is there anything they've done on the project or to date that could be leveraged? I know there are a lot of geotechnical studies that have been done. Could those be leveraged to speed up the process?
They do take them far in the process. However, that last piece of testing the soil specific for that request is the one that has to go through a review.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, and back to this memorandum that we received from the applicant's consultant. Staff has reviewed that, and the responses that we received, staff concurs with. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and a lot of the points that were made in that letter were related, the responses are direct to the EIR. Were these issues that were raised commonly part of the draft EIR process?
So the issues that are raised revolves around designation or acknowledgement of environmentally sensitive habitat area on the site. What was added to the final EIR was a more direct comparison about how the process of the evaluations and the final project design is consistent with all of the stated policies in the city's LCP. So those policies were referenced, but there wasn't that direct cross-cut to say, see, this was done, this was done, this was done. So in CEQA terms, this is viewed as just clarifying or amplifying existing information. There is 0 changes to any of the evaluations, any of the identified habitats, species types, mitigation required. All of that is absolutely static. And this was just providing additional information to address that query.
Okay, and was this memo provided to the appellants?
Oh, yes, it was. Sorry.
And is there an opportunity for them to respond to the memo? Is that is that part of their 5 minutes? We expect that to happen, or?
Yes.
I think the key is that the normal process in an appeal is that you limit the amount of information, once that staff report is issued, there's no more information that gets submitted. In this particular case, that was late information, came out with the staff report, and it was important that we have a response to that in order to consider this appeal. But it's outside of the ordinary procedures that we use, and how are we going to ensure that we hear from the appellants in response to this memo?
I think the city attorney is going to answer that.
Okay, well, he needs to speak up.
He's at the ready.
Yeah.
At the ready, Mayor Kranz. Mayor Kranz, this, the memorandum that was received on behalf of the applicant was responded to by the Chatton Brown Law Group this afternoon, and that information is also available for public review at this time.
Okay, very good. That's the answer I needed. Seeing no more requests for preliminary questions, we will now move into the presentations, and the appellant will have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm Ari Spangler. I represent the Encinitas Community Collective, the appellants. I would like to make a point initially that I received the response from the applicant to the biology issues at around 5 o'clock today. And I also discovered that the new EIR was posted around 5 o'clock today. So I have not had an opportunity to respond. I know that Chatton Brown did respond, but they are not the appellant. So there are still major issues with this project. We believe that the EIR was updated and it wasn't an addendum, so it requires recirculation. At the very least, it needs to be sent back to the Planning Commission to recertify it. There's also continued inconsistency with the Coastal Act, which is implemented through the city's general plan and municipal code, LCP. There's also still unmitigated and unavoidable environmental impacts that haven't been sufficiently addressed. And they require sufficient factual evidence for findings to support the statement of overriding considerations. We haven't seen that factual evidence there. The project is, we believe, inconsistent with the LCP. As identified by the Coastal Commission in its letter, the EIR fails to discuss whether the project is actually consistent with the LCP. And particularly, the project is going to encroach into steep slopes and inland bluff areas, which is contrary to the LCP. It also encroaches into environmentally sensitive habitat areas. The project will also be 4 stories tall, which is contrary to the LCP. And ESHA was actually identified in the biology report as being on the project site, not off-site. That has not been addressed. There is also unmitigated and substantial traffic impacts that require the statement of overriding considerations. It's concerning to us that the staff reports and the applicant's responses have glossed over all of these inconsistencies and the deficiencies in the EIR. It's so concerning that the Coastal Commission actually sent a letter a few days ago to remind city staff that the project proposes significant encroachment into ESHA areas, and the city is still obligated to review how to comply with its LCP. This must have triggered the new EIR that was released this afternoon. State density bonus law does allow for some deviations from development standards, but it doesn't authorize the city to ignore objective standards such as height limitations and the existence of objectively identifiable steep slopes. The project that is in the Bankers Hill case, which is cited by both staff and the applicant and is referenced in support of the request for the waivers, can be distinguished from this project. In Bankers Hill, the city of San Diego approved a density bonus development near Balboa Park with a waiver of setbacks and height restrictions. It was challenged in court as not complying with the city's codes. The Bankers Hill project was not in the coastal zone, so the city's LCP did not apply, and harmonization with the Coastal Act was not required. In contrast, for this project, harmonization with the Coastal Act is required, and it appears that the applicants and the city are now conceding this point. But it means that the city must apply and balance both the density bonus law and the implementing ordinances of the LCP. I don't have too much time to address the specifics of the EIR, but I do think that it needs to be looked at more closely. And it's not fair to the appellants to be given 772 pages to review at 5 o'clock. The amended conditions of approval, we've looked at that. We do note that the project does not actually preserve 48% of the site as open space. The project site actually consists of 1 parcel, and the other 2 parcels that are open space are not a part of the project. We're confused about how the applicant plans to encourage collaboration between Encinitas and Carlsbad to improve the intersection. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of teeth to that condition. And then we're also concerned about the mitigation for the 1.92 acres of property and where that's going to be located. The final, thank you.
Thank you. Now we have 5 minutes for the applicant to make a presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is David Shepard. I'm with Lennar Homes. I'm going to be really brief with this presentation. Much of it was already touched on by the staff presentation. Then I'm going to call up Marco Gonzalez to come up with some of the points raised already and previously. Just a click. Thank you. So really quickly, we could come forward with an application that would be twice the density that we're bringing forward. I want to emphasize that when Lennar Home looked at this site, we really put a lot of thought and consideration into making sure that we're not overdoing it and also staying in line and very considerate of all the environmental laws that are out there and considerate of the open space and the need to protect the habitat. We do have 15 very low income households. Again, those families earning $65,000 a year are going to be able to own one of these homes. Can we go on to the next? Thank you, Anna. Quickly, you saw Anna's, the staff's presentation on additional conditions responding to the community. We're happy to do all these. Restricting the HOA use of, putting into the HOA, the CCRs, the use of charcoal grills on the rooftop decks, minimizing the occupancy, limiting the occupancy, and then parking in adjacent residents. Again, the homes are going to be for sale. We want to work with the city of Carlsbad and Encinitas and what we can do with the La Casa Piraeus interchange area and what we can do for a right turn there. We also support the use. We're happy to, we understand part of the project for over $400,000 in traffic impact fees and really like the concept of return to source that many in the community have spoke to, and we support that. Understand that it's a council decision ultimately. And then again, the light pollution concerns and issues about dark skies. We've actually directed our lighting consultant that does this for a living to make sure that they're all down lights and we're minimizing the wattage and doing everything we can to minimize the light impacts on the community and still respecting the safety needed for the area. Again, very quickly, we believe this is balancing of housing accountability with the surrounding community. We're providing new market rate and affordable homes. We preserve 48% of the open space, and we've responded to community feedback related to project circulation, both pedestrian circulation and parking. So, and now I'd like to turn over to Marco Gonzalez to respond to the comments made so far. Thank you.
Marco Gonzalez, Coast Law Group on behalf of Lennar. The appellants talked about fairness. We had a scoping meeting, we had a CPP, we had a draft EIR, we had 2 planning commission hearings, and we had 1 city council appeal hearing, and then we had a very long delay between that city council appeal hearing and tonight. And it took some folks in the community, not the appellants, but some folks unrelated to the appellant, apparently, until the very last possible day that they could have possibly put something into the record to show up with an entirely new argument. Something that wasn't the subject of appeal, something that wasn't mentioned in the appeal, something that wasn't mentioned in any one of those earlier opportunities. And why did they do this? I'll tell you, as a plaintiff's attorney doing CEQA for 25 years, it's a classic sandbag because they bet on the prospect that we wouldn't have the ability in such a short amount of time to respond substantively to what they put in there. But here's the thing, they get some legal stuff wrong and they get a lot of the biology wrong as well. Legally, the Coastal Commission does not have the authority to designate ESHA during your CDP process or even on an appeal of your CDP. They can only designate ESHA during an LCPA or during your original LCP approval. Something that seems to have been lost on both the commenters and the appellants. And I think coastal staff gets that because they say that this site may have environmentally sensitive habitat as designated under your LCP, and therefore it has to be considered under your LCP. The work that was done by our consultant and in this memo that was given to the city today responds to that very issue. It goes back into the EIR and says, did the EIR assess the biological impacts to these environmentally sensitive habitats as required by your LCP, which is the standard of review? And the memo finds, just as staff and your SQL consultant finds, that yes, it did. There's no new studies required. There's no shirking of responsibility. There, in fact, is a glaring omission on behalf of Chatton Brown and the appellants, and it has to do with the parcel that's to the south of us. They make a big to-do about the notion that we're going to cut off connectivity between that parcel and the Bataquitos Lagoon, but what they fail to understand is that parcel is entitled for 5 units to be constructed, and that entitlement is perfected. It's already slated for development. It's not pristine habitat, and there's no obligation for us to go onto that site and do studies. I imagine that there's going to be additional issues that'll come up. We're available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to public speakers, and currently there are 22 that have signed up, and many which have time donations, but I remind you all that we do have some fence posts for comments here tonight, and I would encourage you, I'm not going to reduce the time, but I would encourage you to be as succinct as possible. So with that,
Okay, I'll call you 3 at a time. First 3 speakers, Michael George, Dolores Welty, and then Edward Bass.
Michael George, 1703 Gascony Road, Encinitas, California. Okay. I guess I'm probably out of order from what you just said, Mayor. But I just got to get this off my chest, so I'm going to do it. Probably, gabbled out, but that's okay. I feel like I'm being surrounded by development. There's a project that's going to go in on Clark with apartment houses. There's a project that's going in, it's being built right now on Leucadia Boulevard up by Quail Gardens. And now you have this project on Piraeus. I don't know where this whole thing went wrong. And I don't blame you people, I'm sorry, me. I don't blame the council because of the position you've been put in. But there's something wrong, something smells wrong in Denmark, And the way I know that is I look out there and I see all those people that normally wouldn't be involved in anything. And that's why I don't know how to deal with this. And I understand that you're in a bind because of the laws and all that jazz, okay? And it's an unfortunate thing because the quality, these are dirty words now, the quality of life of people in our area of Encinitas and Leucadia is going to be adversely affected by all of this. And I just have to say that. Sorry.
Dolores Welty, no comment.
Next speaker then is Edward Bass, followed by Rich Cavanero, and then Michael Marasco.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I'm Edward Bass, 1757 Skyloft Lane. I've been a resident of Encinitas for the last 15 years. Today I want to share with you a picture of Front Street, Lahaina, in Maui. 110 people dead, 800 people still missing. Many of us have walked on this street in our lifetime. The most striking image is the endless chaotic line of burned out cars on Front Street, catastrophic fire event, panicked block exits, abandoned cars, nowhere to go. Many died in those cars. You cannot outrun a fire that's whipped by 50 or 70 mile-an-hour winds. You might say this might never happen here in Encinitas. What about paradise? That's what they said about paradise. Nowhere to go. Fire event, catastrophic, panicked, blocked exits, abandoned cars, nowhere to run. 85 people dead. In Lahaina, as well as in Paradise, emergency preparedness, studies foretold of these catastrophes. The elected officials did nothing. Today, we're bullied by Sacramento and our governor to build more homes, increase home density, and build homes where homes should not exist. This is a recipe for an Encinitas catastrophe. In Encinitas, we're bounded by I-5, La Costa, Saxony, and Leucadia. Our only exit is Piraeus. Imagine a fire from Santa Ana winds, 50-mile-an-hour winds, pushed over the Skyloft Ridge. Our only hope, our only exit is Piraeus Street. We have nowhere else to go. Thousands of residents, hundreds of cars trapped, fires bearing down, hundreds dead. Piraeus becomes another Front Street. Sacramento doesn't care. Our governor doesn't care. Lenore certainly doesn't care. Mr. Mayor, city council members, we elected you to keep us safe from this type of catastrophe. Please, please do not let us turn Piraeus into another Front Street. Vote no on adding another 150 homes in an area that cannot support them. Mr. Mayor, please vote to keep us safe. Thank you.
Rich Cavanero, be followed by Michael.
I'll wait my time, but I appreciate what Ed said. That's exactly where I was going to go with my thought.
Thank you.
Michael Marasco, followed by Andy Gilkison, and then Ellen Burr.
Mayor Kranz, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to hear me tonight. My name is Michael Marasco. I live in Burgundy, which will be the community that's directly impacted by this development. So now learning that you cannot consider the easement until you approve the project, I would just like to remind the City Council of some things, specifically the mobility element that's part of the city's plan. Specifically, Piraeus is a suburban conductor that requires 50 feet wide space for 2 walking lanes, a two-way bike lane, and 2 car lanes. My concern is the direct result of yielding a right-of-way or drainage right-of-way to Piraeus Point Townhomes will be a violation of this 50-foot wide requirement of the mobility element. There'll be no room for 2 walking lanes, a 2-way bike lane, and 2 car lanes. Instead, the pedestrians and bike lanes will be usurped by cars. Kids on e-bikes and pedestrians in the community will be forced onto the shoulders of this narrow road. And in case you're not aware, since our community is pretty much all but done away with school buses, kids are now forced to ride e-bikes to school, like my son. I worry every time he gets on his bike, and it should be clear to everyone in this community why I worry when you have to ride your bike to school. It should be obvious to everyone that this will be hugely impactful, and I would urge you to keep the mobility element in mind when you consider the easement. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I think I'm next. Andy Gilkison? Great. Yes, Mayor Kranz, City Council, appreciate your service to our community. My name's Andy Gilkison, 1747 Cotter Street. I'm here to ask that we do not vacate the right-of-way on Plato and Piraeus. As you know, we vacated on Orpheus and Leucadia Boulevard, now where the Starbucks is at, and that's caused quite a bit of traffic on Leucadia because that area was used in other ways, and the roads weren't able to expand. So that's an example that happened prior. Now the city is asked to vacate Piraeus and Plato's right-of-way by the developer. We need to keep the right-of-way buffer to safety and growth, i.e. widen Plato to prevent backups. Instead of vacating, and we need to add a turn lane on Plato and Piraeus that will be a result of the increased traffic on the units. So by vacating the right-of-way, it reduces the opportunity to widen Plato for a right-of-way or right-hand turn. When also without the complex, there already is an issue, as you know, on Pareas and La Costa. So this was mentioned to add a right lane, or even better yet, if you go to the next page, to add two westbound lanes on Pareas going west. Pareas is designated a suburban collector with a minimum of 50-foot width. Currently, it's 32. With the right-of-way, the Pareas cannot be a suburban collector, even on the 75-foot, which is required on the suburban collector. The right-of-way vocation would not allow even for a residential neighborway of 40 feet. In addition, I'd like to just bring up our trail system. 2 trails are currently on Pareas between La Costa and Leucadia, in addition to the loop in the underdeveloped adjacent to Skyloft. And so we need to save room for our trail system. So if you want to click to the next one. The trail path to be between 4 and 6 feet in width on the east side, that is in addition to the suburban collector width. So the trail extends from Leucadia, all of Normandy to Olympus, and then to La Costa. So we lose the trail system by giving away the right-of-way. And then lastly, if this project must be allowed, please consider restricting investment buyers, looking at STRs, which we know are short-term rentals. We know that this will appeal to many outside investors, and it should be included in the HOAs for under 30 days not allowed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next speaker, Ellen Burr.
I'm just going to speak about mitigating things for the HOA and the board. I've owned condos in all resort areas from Florida and South Carolina to here to Hawaii to Utah. And to put the burden on an HOA and an HOA board to try and enforce the mitigating circumstances, you can't stop people from parking on the adjacent streets. What are they supposed to do? They will be in nonstop calling the cops and involved in litigation. Outlawing charcoal grills? What era are we in? Nobody uses charcoal anymore. It's going to be butane and wood pellets. And frankly, on those roof decks, it's going to be wood-burning fireplaces. This thing is not designed for families or old people or handicapped people. It should be called Viasat Villas. Well, it's true. You talk about, providing workforce accommodations. That is who this is for. We can't get any closer to Carlsbad than we are, and that is who will be living in this project. And I appreciate what he said about not allowing the under 30-day rentals, but, that's going to be a hard one also. I mean, if they get a permit from the city, then I don't know what you can do about that. But beyond that, it's going to be hedge funds and family trust and investors and on that come in and are able to afford these and purchase them. And I would like to say that the idea of having a rooftop deck is insane. It will look like the Pareas Lighthouse from afar if you're on the highway. Up close, it's going to look like...
Okay.
What?
We've had a couple minutes. This was for the last hearing. We're staying focused on the issues that we're
Absolutely. You're talking about mitigating. You were talking about mitigating the roof deck, and I'm just saying, this is not... You cannot allow a roof deck that you can't mitigate for. There's a big difference between 7 people on a rugby team and 7 people who are children. How about the people that live there and now there's a pickleball game going on upstairs? I mean, this is just a huge burden for the people that live there and the HOA board that's supposed to be in charge. And we haven't even gotten to the point of defining a benefit objectively.
Next speaker is Scott Campbell with a time donation from Lisa Lash. Lisa, are you here? And Patricia Rogers. Patricia, are you here? Thank you. Followed by Aaron Stevenson, and then Luke Schaefer with time donation from Terry Richard. Terry, are you here? And Terry Bernard. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Good evening, Council. My name is Scott Campbell, and I live in Encinitas Division 1. And in particular, I will be able to see all of this. Oh, bad. Thank you. I will be able to see all of this from my backyard, eye level, with the lights, the decks, the interior lights, cars driving around, all of it. So I'm going to echo some of the stuff that's been said here. Because the staff has identified 6 areas of impact, there must be a statement of overriding considerations. I personally think that the statement of overriding considerations is bogus, to put it bluntly. And my ask is actually for you to reject the statement of overriding considerations, reject the secret filings of fact, and approve the appeal. That's what I'm asking for today. And I'm going to talk about the social benefits, economic benefits, and the environmental benefits that are mentioned in the statement of overriding considerations, and some other stuff too. Now, what caused this? A lot of this was actually caused by the VMT. And this is actually all in this yellow thing we all have. You can read along. The original analysis that was given back in May had this from the developers, their chart, and it's showing some traffic, shows different ways for people to go shopping. They could go to Walmart, they could go to, I don't even know that expensive store in Carlsbad. I never go there. Anyways, they're showing that traffic is 55 miles an hour on this street. It's rated, the speed limit is 45. The Traffic Mobility Committee wants to turn it to 35. And in fact, they actually want to put streetlights on the whole street. I don't know if everybody's aware of this. They want to do this, independent of whether this project goes in or not. Everything is bogus here. This whole study is bogus. I mean, they're talking about times exceeding the speed limit by a significant amount. Let's talk about the social benefits. It talks about the compatibility with the adjacent neighborhood. The entrance is on Piraeus. It's not even part of any of the surrounding neighborhoods. If it's not part of it, it can't be compatible. The architecture character is not related to any of the houses in that neighborhood. That's not compatible. The protective wall, that's a big thing on the north side. There's high tension wires there. That's one of the reasons that that land is mitigated. It's slopey too, but it's high tension wires. It's not your regular 110 into the house or whatever, 240. It blocks it. That's not a social benefit to be blocked from open space. They talk about those walk paths. Sorry about the horrible picture. I don't, source material is sometimes tough. They're talking about a walkway. The walkway is through the development, 1,110 feet, 1,100, something like that. And if you look really close, I hope you can find a better picture. It's not actually contiguous. It's broken up. There's driveways and streets. There's no contiguous 1,100 square foot path, and it's inside the place. It's not a benefit to the surrounding neighborhoods. They're not going to feel like they can walk through there either. There's no social benefit to the neighborhood community. They also talk about the common area. It's a pool room. All these places have a pool room. Give me a break. I talked about this months ago. There's economic benefits that are touted. The benefit is not quantified. It's not measurable. And it appears to me on a simple reading, it's appeasing the state and making sure we don't get sued by Rob Bonta and all the horrible laws that you will not write letters of intent to oppose. It's a circular thing. No jobs are created. I think Viasat will be happy. If I worked at Viasat, I would love to move from out of state or out of country to live there in these brand new places. I would kill to have those opportunities. That's truth. These places are going to be expensive. $4,000, $5,000 a month. Mortgages. Who can afford that? There's no actual economic benefit other than we say it is. That's not, it's a circular logic. That's fake. This whole project depends on the city giving them land. The whole depends on it. Once again, what's the benefit of that? They're getting this. The developer wants free land from us. They also, if you read through this, it says basically not building more units that could possibly be built is the economic benefit. Once again, that doesn't make any sense. Not building units is a benefit. It's certainly not a monetary benefit. Maybe in terms of funding for track taxes. They talk about funding for some endowment to maintain and preserve. It doesn't actually talk about money. It just talks about the plan. I'm going to write a plan. I can write a plan better than that one probably. Doesn't get any money on the table. None. I heard it was mentioned there's 5 units. That's acceptable development. Nobody's going to complain about R2, R3 zoning. Nobody. I've shown this picture before. These buildings are going to enhance the visual corridor. I just do not understand how buildings can enhance any scenic beauty at all in any way, much less measurable. It's a circular lot. It's just because we say it doesn't mean it's true. Okay, this is a little bit better picture than the older one. This easement, you can see the driveway down on the kind of lower left. And if you look, it kind of pinches out close where there's a tight spot. I believe that if we put in walkways and bikeways, that view from cars exiting the development will be blocked. They're not going to be able to see those bikes and pedestrians coming down. It's a bad deal. The CEQA consideration, let's change a little bit. It talks about the benefits of multifamily over single family, and as far as the VMT, once again, I do not understand how a multifamily housing uses less vehicle miles than single family houses. They have the same amount of toilet paper, they eat the same amount of food, they go to the same amount of schools, they go to the same amount of work. Unless they're combining, which would be smart, hey, I'm going to go shopping at Smart and Final and want me to pick you up some, and we'll split it all up. That's great. Mention that in this document if that's actually the anticipated benefit. Now, mezzanine. A lot of this is fourth floor start talked about mezzanine. I wish I'd saved a little more time. What is a mezzanine? This picture shows what most people think of as a mezzanine. It's part of the room. We can get really picky and say it, up on top, it's connected. It's interesting. I didn't hear much talk about using the square footage for the fire area. Hopefully it's in the documents. Mezzanines have definitions. They're enclosed or not enclosed. And if they're enclosed, which means a door that closes, which has a frame around it, it has height limits. You can't go 48 inches. That means no lights at all, no string lights, no pole, no canopies on poles, no umbrellas. I saw some stuff. I don't know if this International Business Code really applies, but it should anyways. Municipal code should go for it. It says you have to have 2 exits out of a mezzanine. There's only going to be 1 exit. Now, you could jump the wall to the adjacent thing, but I don't think that counts. Here's a picture from the developer. They're talking about square footage. If you look at the shaded areas, it is a very high substantial portion of the floor area. Now, and if you put that as terms of a mezzanine, if you call that a mezzanine, that's a story. It's based on floor area percentage. It's a story. If it's a story, then you can have the string lights and the shade canopies. Nobody wants a 4th story. If it's not a story, it is a mezzanine. You cannot put anything, period. It's not an HOA thing. It's a municipal code thing. And I urge you to amend the municipal code to prevent this in general across the city. This isn't the first place. The voluntary conditions of approval are a joke. That's mentioned before. Specifically mentions charcoal, specifically. Nobody uses charcoal. The maximum number of people, let's see some numbers. It's not quantifiable. The parking is not enforceable. We just had a big thing last week on that. Talk is cheap with Carlsbad. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. Once again, I urge you to support the appeal.
Aaron Stevenson. Aaron will be followed by Luke Schaefer, who has the 2-time donations, and then Donna Dietrich.
Hi, that's a hard act to follow, thanks. Okay, hi, I'm Erin Nicole Stevenson. I'm born and raised locally here in Encinitas, making me a 38-year young local. Encinitas is the most rare and special gem to me and locals alike. I've been around the world and there's truly no place like home. The special tranquility and serenity and overall small beach town magic are what make this place sacred to all of us. I think I speak for all of us when to say that the development over the last few years has been heartbreaking and devastating to the community as a whole. There are, of course, a long list of adverse effects these new developments will have on the community, so I'll keep it to bulletins. Erosion of wildlife habitat. As a Native American, that really strikes a chord with me. Increased pollution, community safety issues, and education overcrowding. Just yesterday, another e-biker was struck and potentially killed in front of my neighborhood due to the intense traffic and congestion. The small beach town roads are not designed for a heavy influx of new residents. From Leucadia to Olivenhain, it goes from a one-lane road with roundabouts to whizzing freeway-style lanes within a few miles. You just can't cram multiple 6-story residential developments with a few yards in between each. It will have a huge detrimental impact to safety. This will strain resources, police, hospitals, the fire department, transportation, and more. When I was a child, there were just flower fields, taco stands, and the beach. I know how lucky I am to still be living here, and I'm grateful for that every single day. My only wish is that for the children and the next generation to know the safe, sweet, secure lifestyle we had growing up here. I know the draw of potential new residents in these developments would be for the children to receive the best education in the country provided by these schools here, and yes, they're absolutely the best of the best. But they are currently already at maximum capacity, meaning their children would have to travel outside of the community to attend schools. This would only add to the traffic craze, congestion, and overall danger to the students and the community. That's not fair to the new or original residents nor their children. Students should have the right to attend schools within local neighborhoods, fostering the sense of tight-knit community we all share and love. It is our collective quest to safeguard the charm and allure that defines Encinitas for forthcoming generations. The new development of this condominium will be abhorrently devastating to this community. It would completely change the skyline, the beautiful sunsets, and the overall small town ambiance and glow of this rare gem. Encinitas is worth more than gold and more than money can buy, and please remember that when signing off on any next developmental project that crosses your desk. Thank you for your time.
Luke Schaefer. Luke Schaefer will be followed by Donna Dietrich, and then James Bailey.
Do I have a presentation up there? The council members, thanks, special thanks. You can start on slide 5, please. Good evening, council, people of the audience. My name is Luke Schaefer. I live directly adjacent the northeast corner of what we're projecting the Piraeus Point project. Talked to you guys last time, talked to the Planning Commission at different times. Again, my biggest thing, our biggest thing, I believe, is yes, this goes away, fine, great. Love for it to go away, but no, that's not the trajectory of where we're headed. I do not hold Lennar any harm or bad feelings towards Lennar. This is their job. They're a very public company, and they're loud about the fact that they make a lot of money. They do a good job about it. That's their job. Our job as the residents is to come to you guys who we voted here to protect us. So without further ado, next slide, please. Land use policy 9.1, encourage and preserve low-density residential zoning within the I-5 corridor while preserving the best natural features and avoiding the creation of a totally urbanized landscape. And maintain I-5 interchange areas to conform to the specifications of this overall goal. The city, that's you guys, will develop an I-5 view corridor plan to implement this policy. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. Everybody knows what that looks like? Go for it. Next slide, please. That's what it's going to look like. Period. I mean, I don't know how else to, I mean, I've sat up here and talked to the commissioners about safety, about the kids, about all the other stuff, but now we have to come to policies that you guys or your predecessors wrote. Why? Why did you write it? Why did they write it? Right? I mean, it's a very simple point. You guys follow it. Next slide, please. You can read the top one on your own. Land use policy 6.6, the construction of very large buildings shall be discouraged where such structures are incompatible with the surrounding development. Pretty simple. I don't have a big law degree. I'm not 25 years in the making. I have 20 years doing protecting the country at a high level, and I have been in charge of 50,000 constituents in the northwest portion of Iraq as the chief of police. I get what it is. I get what you guys are doing here. But there's a way to do it. There's a way to just read it and just tell them to do it right. There is a way to do this properly. It may be at 133 units or 132, but somewhere you guys wrote 134 units. And so now they're like, well, we got to do this up to 149. Fix it. Everybody's coming to you about safety. Kids, they're going to be on these roads. It's not a fucking joke. All right, next. This is what it looks like. 149 units where other 22 houses look. That's what you're putting in there. That is urbanized, per what we just talked about at the land use policy 9.1. Next, please. So we'll get to this next, please. Next. All right. They're asking for waivers. They just asked for another waiver for fourth floor because, thank you, Mr. Ellers brought that up because of something else he used before. Well, here we are now. They have a second one that's got 40% use. Why give them this waiver? They do not need this waiver to make good money. And by the way, those two buildings that they would get rid of at the 40% incline does not include those homes. Out of the whatever amount of money that they want to make, if they really want to do good for this community, I'm not here. I'll say this. This is not any other community. This is Encinitas. If they did right by us, I think everybody in here, as we've shown, we will support. If they came in and did it really right, I think we would actually write recommendations for them to go to other cities. Being Encinitas, I think that holds water somewhere. We're not another city. I don't want to name another city because I don't want to talk down to another city, but there are other cities where this just isn't that big of a deal. This is that city. And oh, by the way, you sat up here and said we come from a very affluent community. This is not a low-income community, period, dot. There is no low income anywhere for a lifestyle. And for the low income requirements of having to walk places because they only have one vehicle because there's only one parking garage and there's no guest parking. Where the heck are they going to walk? And when they do walk, it's not going to be safe. I'm on that road. All of us are on that road daily. It just doesn't make sense. Next, please. Next. You've heard from everybody else. I'm not going to belabor the point, but doing all the right hydrology reports and the geological reports, especially given the rains. And oh, by the way, our government and the global government, if you will, is saying that there's a global warming. There's stuff changing. So maybe that's a part of what they need to look at. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job, but I'm asking you to do it properly, please. Next, please. This is a unit up in Carlsbad at the north end that was developed by Lennar. This is rooftop lighting by which everybody's next, times two. Yep. So you see that this is actually going to happen. It's pretty easy, and I live directly east. We'll see that here in a second. Next. This is further away, so you can see from 370 feet away. That's what it looks like. It's about 522 feet to the neighbor across the freeway from me. I've measured it. Next. Yep, you can kind of see that. Next, please. Next. Freeway. Next. This is a view from my living room. This is wall-to-wall windows. You can see it. Next, please. That's the line. You can't see it. You can see 3 poles if you get up close enough, but those are my poles that I created so I can see the poles that they're not required to put up because of low density. Just because this is low density, they don't have to put up the story poles. We've had them to the house. And oh, by the way, those power lines, I asked how much they were going to cost for to put them down. They told me $4 million to my face. In the report, it's $1,017,000. So they're going around, the PCR that they did, over at La Costa and all that, whatever it's called, over at La Costa. It was really just to get evidence on us and us to complain for them to go back and get their lawyers to fix it. That was it. They weren't really looking to fix anything and change anything to the betterment of this community. Right? So they got all the information they needed from us because we complained about it and talked about it, and then they didn't really do shit about it. What they did about it is that we found a lawyer that is the predominant lawyer in this community that does this for all the communities that are being developed. He is the guy to go to. So he has 25 years of coming up here and talking pretty, while all of us have everyday day jobs. We got to go off and live our life and then come in here and protect our right of way. Next. Oh, by the way, can you go back, please? That unit right there on the left-hand side, that is a low-income unit that I ran out to a nurse for the last 3.5 years. A pediatric nurse that goes all the way up to Santa Ana. She chooses to live here because specifically of that house. It's a studio. It's not even that big. But now guess what? Her low-income space is now going away, and she doesn't have the visual acuity that she had that made my rent worth it. So now I have to, they're not going to put the poles down. They're going to put a ugly, go next, please. They're going to put an ugly building that's going to block all of that. They're not going to put those down. So now when I want to put a second story up or I want to sell it to somebody that would be willing to put up a second story, I lose all that value. Personally, and I'm not trying to take away from everybody's efforts here. So you're just giving somebody that's going to make $40 million. They've self-announced it. They have to announce it as a public company. And you're taking away from, I'm going to say the little man, but the everyday man. Next. Next. You can go all the way back to next. Right here. Development shall not be allowed to permanently in that access, utilities and services shall be available prior to allowing this development. Access is by foot too. That's not by vehicle. That's by foot, and it is not there. Next. Oh, right here. That's a joke. The traffic impacts, the VMT is BS, and everybody knows it. Next. Back one, please. Go back to, please.
Thank you.
I know. Protect our natural resources. Okay, forget it. You guys get it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Donna Dietrich. Donna will be followed by James Bailey, and then David Hill with time donation from Megan Riggs. Megan, are you still here?
Council
And
members.
Tanya Bell.
Council members. I'm Donna Dietrich. I live at 365 La Mesa Avenue, and this is my first time I have come to a council meeting. And I really don't have anything prepared, and I didn't intend to speak, but I will say this. After, I came with an open mind also. After listening to everyone with their objections and with the presentation, I personally think, as do many of us, this project will ruin our way of life. This is a disaster for Encinitas, the total community of Encinitas. That's all I have to say. Please, take a second look at this project. Do not make this a done deal. Thank you.
James Bailey. Okay. Next is David Hill, and he has 2 time donations. Kathleen Lees, and then Doug Miller with a time donation from Bill Wickett. Bill, are you still here? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm David Hill. I do have a, maybe, can I put this on the overhead? That's fine. What I want to present here is something that I tried to present on a previous presentation here. And I understand that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is in negotiations with Brian Grover, representing Lennar, on the Endangered Species Act of 1973, Section 10, which is the grading. The issue of it all, and I have discussed with Taylor Curtis of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife some of the issues here, and primarily is that the 8,600 trucks that are full, not counting the empty ones, are going to go right past the Caltrans project habitat right there that's highlighted, because that comes together right on Pariah.
Sir, can you make sure you speak into the microphone?
Pardon me. I could start again. The highlighted area of the plat map there is owned by Caltrans, and that is a habitat protected environment. And there's gnatcatchers on there, and they have a certain protection, as we all know, from the EIR and from what U.S. Fish and Wildlife has discussed. So part of the Section 10, which is part of the Endangered Species Act, Section 10 is to do with the grading. So now Lennar needs to get the grading permit, and they're in negotiations. So currently, we do not know the extent of those negotiations, and I don't think we can allow for the EIR or this council to approve until we know what the issues are, or what the mitigation issues can be, or what the conditions that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is going to set upon the grading permit. But be that as it may, right now, if the way that the contractor wants to remove the 83,000 cubic yards using 8,600 trucks, whether they're full and empty, and all the construction material, they would be coming from La Costa Avenue onto Parias. And then they would also leave from Parias onto La Costa Avenue. And it's only feet, as per the map up there, from the protected environment. So that is called an incidental take, which means that you have put stress and anxiety and noise and disturbance on the gnatcatcher and the other species that happen to be occupying the property. This is something I discussed with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they say, aha, this is one of those aha moments. We haven't even considered that. Well, I'm asking them to consider it, and I met with them a month and a half ago, and hopefully it's being discussed. But right now, there is no paper out there, either on the website or from anybody, to say what they are discussing. And this is a critical environmental issue. So therefore, in the interim, I would say, as part of this presentation, that all traffic associated with this project should emanate to and from Leucadia Boulevard, period, not from La Costa Avenue, because of this impact. And that would eliminate a lot of the issues with the traffic. But the thing is, that with thousands and thousands of vehicles associated with this project, it's going to affect the protected areas as they are right now. And I think this council needs to understand that, comprehend it, and do the research, because this is a critical part that has been not discussed in the EIR. There is nothing, there's not a darn thing in the EIR considering all the traffic construction coming from La Costa Avenue and impacting the area. It is totally shameful. So I want to say is that this EIR is totally incomplete. In actual fact, this is a Swiss cheese type EIR, because there's so many holes in it. That's what it looks like. It needs to be buttoned up. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be ironed out. And all these issues that we brought up in the past, even Caltrans, the hydrology people, have not approved of this project because the calculations have not been submitted and they are not in compliance with Caltrans. And Nick Koutafidis, before he poo-pooed the whole thing and said, no, it's okay, we got it under control. No, you don't have it under control. That's another issue that's wide open. And the thing is that all this runoff goes into Bataquitas Lagoon. And I am part of Bataquitas Lagoon Foundation. And I object strongly to anything that comes off of this property that's going to pollute Bataquitas Lagoon. Period. And it's not right. So this is another issue that needs to be covered and needs to be addressed to the satisfaction not only Bataquitas Lagoon people, but also to the community at large. We need to do a proper job, but I'm telling you right now that this EIR should be recirculated, or the whole thing should be abandoned and redone again, or just give it up. Because it is incomplete. I don't know how many times I can say it, it's incomplete. The other issue I want to talk about in the last 2 minutes I have is we put it together analysis for the ECC on the 4th floor. I'm presuming now it is classified as the 4th floor. It was based also the calculations based on the maximum density of the people. 80 people, probably not. But be that as it may, the building, the floor should be constructed. You don't want people falling through, of course, because you can't control the amount of people going to be on the roof. And in actual fact, there may be more people than most. But also, you have to consider that there's only one exit. And the AIA, American Institute of Architects, says you need one exit for 10 or less. But if they're going to load these places up with more than 10 people, maybe 20, maybe 30 people, you don't have enough exits. And as the previous speaker said, what are they going to do? Hop over in case of emergency to the next door neighbor, which they are. They're all belly to belly in that place. So notwithstanding, in an emergency, they would. So that's also not to say that someone's going to leave a cigarette somewhere smoldering on one of the wonderful couches, and then you're going to get an incipient fire. And the Class A indicates that the fire, and you have to check the underwriter labs, the UL, for a Class A, and that will say that fire would not be, it cannot be generated on there, or the Class A is supposed to be a kind of fire prevention from any fire going on. So it's a big issue. And also being the 4th floor, just one last thing, the Planning Commission did say that they have to comply with the health and safety mandates for the state architect, and that's true. You need an elevator for the disabled people living in that building or happen to become disabled. They need the elevator in there for the 4th floor. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Ms. Antil. My name is Kathleen Lees, and I live on Urania. And it might be possible for northbound traffic to come from Leucadia Boulevard, but it would not be possible for all of those trucks to leave southbound because some of them are too big to take the curve down Normandy and then Urania. But tonight, what I wanted to speak about was last night I attended the safety and mobility improvements in the vicinity of housing element sites for Zone 1. There were only 15 people there, and we stood around and said, where is everybody? And I think that probably people just didn't know about the meeting. So I want to suggest that in the future, when you have the other 2 meetings, that you look to the lists of the CPP meetings, people who have attended the CPP meetings or otherwise contacted the city and wanted to stay notified about these different projects, and that you send them a notice. You could also send the notice out to the 500 feet of addresses. And just another point that I want to keep making, because I think it's important, we need to lower the speed on Piraeus, and we need to do traffic calming measures on Piraeus. And I have to say that mobility meeting last night was encouraging because it became clear to me that the city is looking and is aware of the traffic, this is mostly traffic and mobility issues that are being caused by these developments. And so that was reassuring to me. It's not like, it's not just off somewhere and going to be thought about later. And I hope all of the fees, I don't know how this works, but the fees that are paid into the city coffers for traffic mitigation, if all of the money that comes from each of these developments should stay to help improve the problems that are caused by each development. And I know I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I know a number of people from families who are, and have worked with a lot of developers over the year, and they're usually very proud of the work that they do, but I honestly don't know how a company can be proud of these developments that they're doing today. Honestly don't, because they're not benefiting our community. We're having to protect ourselves from them. And to me, that's a shame. So anyway, thanks very much, and get the word out about these meetings, because people really need to be there.
Doug Miller. He has one-time donation, followed by Marianne Wickett with a time donation from Roberta McGregor. Roberta, are you still here? Thank you. And then followed by David Williamson.
Thank you. Dear Mayor and council members, we, the residents, are asking you to deny a statement of overriding considerations. The counsel for the applicant asserts in a memo to the planning staff that a statement of overriding considerations is simply a written statement explaining the specific reasons why the social, economic, legal, technical, and other beneficial aspects of the proposed project outweigh the unavoidable adverse environmental impacts and why the city is willing to accept such impacts. Simply, a simple, single written statement rationalizing and excusing all of the unaddressed matters is tantamount to burning down a house to get rid of the termites. Eliminate all environmental constraints, allow cutting into steep slopes, taking the soil off site, building potentially cheap retaining walls, use public rights of way to build a bioretention pit, allow rooftop decks because there's no recreation space, all for the sake of 15 low-income units. They also don't want any precedents or comparisons to other projects to be, findings for other projects to be considered. Why? We're not going to pay attention to the Coastal Act, we're not going to pay attention to the Endangered Species Act, not pay attention to the environmental and topological constraints, not pay attention to traffic, not pay attention to the flawed and blundered site selection process, or to the city of Encinitas that's going to deal with this project forever. Please, if you're going to hold your nose and approve this project, do not give them any sort of blanket justification and illusion of an endorsement and make them deal with each of the individual negative adverse effects separately. Thank you.
Marianne Wickett, followed by David Williamson, and then Carlin Schmink. Schmink, I believe.
Good evening. I'm Marianne Wickett. I'd like to take a few minutes to revisit the EIR study that stated the Piraeus Point project may have a negative impact on the environment with respect to aesthetics, wildfire, energy, and utilities. I reference this in specific light to the recent events in Maui and the death and destruction caused by a severe weather occurrence and the impact that weather on existing power exposures. Reports have indicated that the combination of downed power lines that were not shut off and high winds all but wiped out the entire community of Lahaina to the extent that remains of human bodies were turned into ash and unidentifiable. Discussion currently identifies faulty structural maintenance of the power lines and poles as a known issue that Hawaii Electric chose to ignore, even though they filed a plan with the government to mitigate such risks. This leads me to introduce into this discussion a project review and plan for the grid hardening in Encinitas. And frankly, in my opinion, we dodged a bullet over the weekend. Grid hardening is a combination of systems or actions taken that create a stronger infrastructure of utilities than the present infrastructure to better protect utility consumers and area residents from weather-related or disaster-related power outages. Per a recent Time magazine article from 1992 to 2020, federal, state, and local fire services have dealt with 32,652 power line ignited fires across the U.S., citing a report from Inside Climate News in California. Alone, PG&E has been blamed for over 30 wildfires since 2017 that have wiped out 23,000 homes and businesses while killing 100 people. PG&E just settled a $150 million lawsuit as a result of the Zog fires. Maybe this is why the PG&E website has a dedicated section to grid hardening with an emphasis on undergrounding over 10,000 miles of power lines. The focus of grid hardening is to address four main exposures: strong winds. NOAA recommends that all coastal power poles be of structure and installation to resist winds of up to 140 miles an hour. Does Encinitas abide by this recommendation? Probably not. Severe storms and flooding. Has anyone anticipated the impact of the above-ground power lines and poles with soft, loose soil caused by severe rain in combination with high winds on an elevated bluff 30 feet above solid soil? Wildfires. Power lines are currently present above ground between Olympus and La Costa Avenue. The surrounding easements and existing land is ripe and full of non-mitigated vegetation. One downline in combination with high winds could escalate into a major fire without much opportunity to respond. Think of Lahaina. And if you've been up in our area, you will know that's exactly what's up there. Power poles that could go down with lots of unmitigated vegetation. And extreme heat is another consideration. Research also shows that the number of natural disasters has increased 5 times over the last 50-year period. Some of these disasters attributed to climate change, with this trend showing no signs of slowing or reversing. An article from the Let Us Company website addresses their positioning on grid hardening. For example, these efforts may uncover the need for the utility to move overhead lines underground to reduce the impact, while increasing operational readiness through flood mitigation efforts like building barriers or walls. Another example of implementing these measures is the need to focus on pole line location and design. Specifically, the utility may look at optimizing structured poles and line design to improve access to minimize storm impact. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, estimates that 250% ROI on ground hardening, as every $1 million spent on grid hardening generates $250 million in GDP growth by avoiding outages while boosting reliability and customer satisfaction. With all these different resources referencing the benefits of grid hardening, why isn't the city of Encinitas a leader in this solution? We have torn up our already ruined streets to install TIG-installed cameras on every pole, move the end zone on every piece of city and state building and zoning to allow for insane amounts of traffic, increase parking dilemmas, no additional pedestrian walkways for children and parents. To me, the biggest issue with this project, there is no way for children to safely get to school. Come walk the route if you haven't already. But when we get an opportunity to do something really proactive, The city doesn't even mention it. This investigative work has been foisted on the citizens of Encinitas themselves as they try to defend their investments and their communities against insurmountable odds in a fight with their own elected officials and the teams of developers and lawyers trying to take over our city and policies. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you.
Next speaker is David Williamson, followed by Mary Usher, then Sheila Cameron with a time donation from John Carlson, who I see is present, and then Donna Westbrook.
Hi, thanks for having this forum. My name's Dave Williamson. I live at 748 Plato Place. That's 2 doors down from my new 500 neighbors. There's been some maps up there that I wish I was smart enough to think ahead and bring, but you know, if you look at the 5 or 6 acres of this development, that's going to have 400 to 500 people, 149, just, you know, average household. You've got probably about that amount of people in the square mile next to it. So what I see here, there's been a lot of, you know, talk, which is all, I'm sure, correct about, you know, FERC and environmental impacts and stuff like that. And there's a lot of dense information, so I just want to kind of simplify it, which is you're seeing that pad get developed and you're going to see 400 to 500 new people living there. And there's no improvement in infrastructure. I mean, show me the improvement in infrastructure. There's nothing. There's no mandatory sidewalk. Kids got to get up to Plato Place. No one's talked or up to Capri Elementary. I haven't heard any talk about that. I know there's like, well, we're going to really try and put this 400,000 into developing, but there's no, it's not in the plan. And you guys have to approve a plan or not. You should approve a plan that works. There's a lot of weaknesses. They're not going to bury the power lines. That should be like a no-brainer. And a lot of the things that are, you know, quote, unavoidable with the traffic, it's avoidable if you either don't approve the plan or you send it back and say, we have to mitigate these things. It seems like this is an all or nothing thing, and here it is, take it or leave it. I would say leave it and then wait for the right plan. We're not a bunch of NIMBYs. We know that something has to get developed there. It's been sitting there. It's been too good for me for too long. I get it. That's a big empty space. That something's got to go there. It's just very ill-suited for this project. And I know they could jam 300 units in there. I don't really take that as a lot of solace because I don't see how you could even approve that. So some development's going to go there. It's going to have some density. I get how the world is now, but I think you could send it back and just get something that the community would, if not embrace, at least accept. Because this, we just don't accept it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Mary Usher? Is Mary here? Okay. Sheila Cameron, she just stepped out, so we'll go to Donna Westbrook, and then we'll get back to Sheila.
Donna Westbrook, Encinitas. You've got quite a bit of information tonight to really give you what you need to approve the appeal and deny the project. However, what bothers me is that Lennar is pushing very hard to get this approved by you, because once it's approved, they then go to the final map. And the final map is when they get all of the roads. And because it is a final map, residents have no right and will not be able to protest whatever Lennar wants for those roads. And you should not do anything like that until you get plans, drawn plans, maps, and everything else of what Lennar wants to do with the roads, with Piraeus and then Plato Place. This is a very, very important portion for you to look at. If you say, well, we have to separate them. No, you do not. Because what Lennar did not do was to put what they plan to use on those public roads that you will be giving them as a permit. And there's no such thing as a permit per se. They're going to have a permanent easement, if you want to call it that, which means they'll be moving probably their property out into the road and moving the road over, which is what they did on Hymettus, in case you haven't seen what they did there. I find it very difficult that you would listen to whoever's giving you the advice that this doesn't mean much and you're going to get money back. You are not. So please do not approve this project. Please approve the appeal, because if you don't, when it goes to the final map, you're cutting off all residents as far as what they have to say about it, because you cannot say anything. You have given away your right. If you give away your right and you do it tonight, the final map will take care of whatever happens on those two roads. And you better start thinking about that. You better tell Lennar, come back and show us what you want to do with those two roads, and we want you to put it on your tentative map. Because if you put it on the tentative map, it's really hard for them to get out of what they're going to do. Oh, they can move things around, and sometimes it gets rather dicey, if you will. But at least you have an idea of what you're approving. So do not approve the Lennar. Please approve the appeal. Thank you.
Many important moments in my life, I've been in the bathroom, so I don't know, it just happens that way. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will state again unequivocally that the majority of voters rejected these 15 project sites in the 2018 ballot. Despite that, we find ourselves having to accommodate them, intruding into our neighborhoods all over the city, with 40% of the sites falling into our community of Leucadia. This particular site, Piraeus Point, has caused the neighborhood and community a great deal of angst, is before you in an appeal tonight. You are hearing many valid concerns and issues. Okay, I came here not knowing for sure that the points I'd made before the Planning Commission had been taken in by staff and Lennar, which was the barbecues on the roof, my concern about those, the posting on the meeting buildings about maximum number of people, the parking, and 15 very low-income units to be sold, not rented. And sold is what the intent of the law was, that people would own the American dream, not be in a cage like a gerbil, and continue to have to rent forever. The point of dark skies, I will bring up again. General Plan Policies 215 and 4.10 I gave you a letter on June 21st that explained those. You can't keep denying the general plan. It was written with the intent of guiding this city, and you've ignored it. We have dark skies without a written policy, per se, except for these points in the general plan, which are very important, written in. And we have it because we have the Bataquitas Lagoon. Now, I know for a fact, and I've been reminded, that Alevenheim has a written policy, and they do because they were bad. They have a lot of land, 2.5, 3 acres, an acre, and they all wanted to put in tennis courts, et cetera. So naughty, naughty. They wrote them a policy to make sure they'd have dark skies. So there you have it. Okay, 2 things that are really, really important to me are the safe route to school along Piraeus and Plato. These are safety things. The other thing is the La Costa Piraeus juncture. Okay, with 149 units, there will be approximately 400 residents, maybe more. 10 to 15%, 40 to 50 of them children. The nearest elementary school is Capri Elementary, and for lack of public transportation, most likely the children will be walking in the road. You need to establish a CIP for the transportation improvement funds to be directed to this safe route to school. The second place it can be directed, La Costa Piraeus Juncture. At the estimate of 6 car trips per day per dwelling unit, there is the possibility of 894 cars traveling daily along Piraeus from this project. Lennar has stated that they anticipate 80% of the traffic emanating from this project to be going to La Costa. I would like you to refer to Mr. Dan Baxter's plans that he has written about 2 left-hand turns and a right-hand turn being established at the corner of La Costa and Piraeus. We reached out to Mr. Tom Frank, who is a transportation director and engineer in Carlsbad, and he said it is feasible. He pointed out the proposed 3-lane improvement we suggested is probably technically feasible. A cost estimate of $1 to $2 million, probably for a project of that magnitude. Moving forward would require a development request proposal by the city of Encinitas to the city of Carlsbad, and any change in that intersection will require approval by Caltrans, and they can be slow to work with. So this is why I'm saying get going. Be proactive, not retroactive. That's why I'm requesting that you set up capital improvement plans, projects right now, line items, and start putting the money into it. You have $400,000 in transportation improvement fees. They shouldn't go into the general fund. They should go to this project for the sake of the community and the protection of the community. We can get a safe route to school. We can get that intersection at La Costa and Piraeus taken care of. Lennar Homes has already deposited $400,000, and any and all monies generated by this project should benefit the needs of this neighborhood and not just be dumped into the general plan. The money can start a balance in one or both of these CIPs, or you could combine them so that we can reach these goals. I'm trying to help you guys make a decision and do it right. And you know that CIPs are the way to go to start with money. If you pass this project and there's other money negotiated for the piece of property, that should go toward these projects as well. Get busy.
Mayor, that does conclude public speakers, and then the following individuals have registered opposition but have chosen not to speak. So when I call your name, if you'd please just raise your hand so we know you're here. Carlin Schminke. She's still here? Okay. Susan Saland. Christina Vega. Is Christina still here? No. Tatiana Pestrakova. Not here. Natalie Satoon. Natalie's here. Christy Dean. Charles Smith. Sharon Wilt. Kristen Smith, and L. Newbert. Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all for your comments and keeping them as brief as possible and on the points as much as you could. We are going to take a 15-minute break. Going to get back into the public hearing here, and I appreciate your indulgence on that break. In the meantime, we have just completed the process of hearing public speakers, and we are going to hear some rebuttals by both the applicant and the appellants. I noted early on when I was going over the rules that we were going to have 3-minute rebuttals, but I've decided there's enough information here that we need to kick it to 5. So we're going to have 5-minute rebuttal, and the first up is the applicant. Is that microphone lit there?
Doesn't sound like it.
Controls that. Okay.
Hello,
now we got
hello.
it.
Yeah, there
Thank
you go. We heard a lot, and we saw a lot of public speakers, and there's 2 things that stood out to me. One is what we didn't see, and that was a representative of Chatton Brown of VHL or Mr. Turner to show up and to give you the opportunity to look them in the face and say thank you for their very late sandbagging hit of a letter that they dumped on us within the last week, on the very last day that they could possibly put this into the record. Interestingly, the rebuttal that they made to our consultant's memo, we got after I made my presentation. But let me tell you what it said. It said that you guys need to apply the Coastal Act standard of review, even though you're not the Coastal Commission, and even though you don't have designated ESHA on this property. That is wrong. We have cited, our consultant has cited in their memo, the case Security National Guarantee versus Coastal Commission from 2008. Absolutely directly on point. That was a circumstance where on a CDP appeal, the Coastal Commission said, hey, there's this area that is environmentally sensitive habitat that you guys didn't treat as Coastal Act environmentally sensitive habitat area. And the court said, no. You get an opportunity in the LCP amendments to designate habitat. The standard of review is the LCP. The standard of review here is Goal 10, Policy 10.5, and the guidelines implementing that. What you have in the record in terms of an explanation of what that analysis is what was submitted to staff today by our consultant. And what that does is it says, hey guys, guess what? We did the analysis. That 750-page EIR actually contains all of the analysis that you need to do the assessment of compliance with Policy 10.5 and the guidelines. There's no new information. There's no new evidence. Everything is there. The only piece of evidence, frankly, that none of us had really considered is the fact that the southern parcel, the parcel to the south of us across from Plato, already has a development plan for it. And that's really kind of the only new information that anybody has introduced. And that's just something that existed. It's just the recognition of that. Then no new studies are done, no new impacts are identified. The other thing, remember I said that there was 2 things that I noticed during the public comment is we didn't hear a very strong focus on the 5 to 7 issues that were continued from the last appeal hearing. And I said this in my opening. We have a process here that provides for significant public input. And you have an appeal process that has a very important requirement. It says when you file your appeal, you have to state every issue that you are appealing and every piece of evidence that was presented to the Planning Commission that supports your position on appeal. Why do we do that? We do that so that we don't have what we saw tonight, and that is the attempt to relitigate all of the issues that are addressed in that 772-page final EIR. That we should be narrowing our focus. We should be talking about, is the 4th story warranted? As staff rightfully points out, we are entitled to a waiver. You can't apply a development standard that keeps us from building unless there's a public and safety issue. We should be talking about the fact that the easement can't be decided tonight and will be decided after this project's appeal is determined. We should be talking about the safety of the steep slope encroachment, which is something that your engineers have looked at since the last hearing, and staff is very much on board with what's being proposed. All of the issues that were raised at the last hearing, we went back and diligently worked with staff and our consultants and the CEQA consultant for the city, and we made sure that we had that all ready to go and that we were going to address every issue that was brought up at the appeal hearing. And instead, at the last minute, we had dumped on us an entirely new issue that was not the subject of the original appeal, did not include the original appellants, and that barely made it under the wire to sandbag us and force us all to jump through unrealistic hoops. I think you are well within your purview to discard that evidence and to say this is not within the scope of the appeal. Thank you very much, but no. We don't have to scramble to respond to it, and we do appreciate that everybody has, including staff and our consultants. But that being said, at the end of the day, the task that you're burdened with is something that we've been talking about since the beginning of the Planning Commission process. And that is, your obligation is to harmonize the requirements of environmental protection and CEQA and the Coastal Act with density bonus and housing law. We feel like we've jumped through every hoop to make this project as palatable and as good for the community as we possibly can while hitting the minimum density standard and not going overboard when we know other folks might have. Thank you for your time. We're available to answer questions. Just let us know.
Okay, 5 minutes for the appellant.
Ari Spengler for Encinitas Community Collective, and then I have Karen Caden here too, who's going to follow up. I just wanted to comment in response to Mr. Gonzalez's comments. What you saw here was absolutely no support from the community for this project. There's a lot of reasons for that have all been expressed by probably, I believe there are about 60 speakers. The appeal did identify concerns with encroachment into environmentally sensitive land. One of the community members noticed that, and he hired Chatton Brown, and that's why they decided to submit a letter in support of our appeal. The city, as the lead agency, is responsible for identifying all environmentally sensitive habitat and determining the impact that the project might have on that habitat and whether mitigation can be performed. The city is also responsible for following the LCP. So we're just asking you to do that. We're asking you to follow the objective standards in the LCP. The slope encroachment should not occur, and the height limit should be abided by. We would like for you, if you're going to approve this project, to deny those waivers. I also wanted to note that the applicant, I guess we'll need to provide an up to 100-foot zone that extends from the north side of the retaining wall into sensitive habitat areas. And that is going to require additional encroachment onto the slope and areas that the applicant is promising to preserve. So I would just like to have more information about that as well. We would ask tonight that the council carefully consider all of the findings that it has to make tonight in order to support this project. I think that the evidence before you actually supports a denial. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, council members. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak tonight. I just want to mention, out of the housing site element selection, 7 vacant sites were selected, and 6 of those vacant sites all have deductions. The only vacant site, Cannon 2, Perez Point, is the only one that has no deductions because it said no constraints. That means 100% buildable, and the other ones are not 100% buildable. Okay, scenic view. It's in the plan, general plan, blend in the hillside bluff with less mass, no bulk, less in heights, color scheme, larger setbacks, which I don't see here, and where's all the landscape buffer, and 30 trees per acre. Next, no waiver to grant that 40% encroachment into 37% of the land. Regards to the grills, that charcoal grill is ridiculous. I want to add to that, please. No ignitable devices up there. No noise, no odor, no lights, no dogs allowed. all to protect our existing neighbors and that community. And we talk about health and welfare and safety. And just think about the air pollution. This is a very large cut into the encroachment. They talk about 83,000 cubic yards and fill. We're going to breathe this, and we know it goes also into our pores. Think about our welfare. Power poles, underground, we don't want any lightning or uncared for. I don't know how, there's an easement up there, and no trees under them. I think that's a fire hazard. Thank you. And then my last say is, last to second. Lots of benefits the applicant states for marketing pitch. What benefits do we get as the neighbors? Statement of overriding considerations is all about what the applicant wants, gets, and profits from. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I'm closing the public hearing. And that brings us to council discussion and action. And I would point out that on this appeal, the letter that we received and the memo actually is technically outside the four corners of this appeal. So it did cause a lot of scrambling, and staff and the applicant responded. And we have a lot of information before us, and we have some edits to the EIR, but ultimately that is outside of the scope of this appeal. So as we are deliberating here, we need to stay focused on the issues that are outlined in the staff report where it says background. So with that, Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, I thought from a procedural standpoint, I thought it might be good to go down one by one through the 7 points of the appeal. And rather than, we could bounce real, here and there, and it could get very confusing for us and whatnot.
Yeah,
So-
and in fact, I would ask staff to put that slide up, please.
Yeah.
I think it was like your third slide, and I stole your thunder because I actually listed them all. Maybe second slide. Thank you. You gonna go, Bruce?
Oh, okay, yeah. You agreed, so we'll talk about the easement then. I was waiting, there we go, proposed easement. And so I think as we discussed earlier, as you mentioned, we're not going to go into what we do with the easement, other than I think we can restate facts here that we own the easement. This project is predicated on some use in that easement. I thought I heard some information that I didn't think was exactly true. The buildings are not moving out into the easement. They're not planned to ever be in the easement, but there is some structure in that easement. And so, but as far as the developer's ability to use that easement, it is not a decided factor, and that will be the subject of a future public meeting, correct?
Correct, and this project, if it is approved, will have a condition that makes that statement. The applicant owner shall obtain the necessary approvals from the city council to allow proposed private improvements within the public right-of-way along Piraeus Street and Plato Place prior to issuance of the first construction building/grading permit. So there was a public comment that suggested that were this project to be approved tonight, that would immediately allow the encroachment into our the easement, and it's not the case. We're going to have this condition there.
Or I can go again.
Yep, keep going.
I'll keep talking. Okay, so the next one is the status of the staircase as a fourth story And so I am pleased to hear that the decision or the judgment of the staff is that would constitute a fourth story. Now, we're using a waiver there. And when I really go back to this entire project and the approval or denial of this project, it's really a question of what is the city's discretion? And then there are actually multiple areas of that discretion. And as we go through the different ones, I'm going to bring up what is our discretion and what is not our discretion. Let's talk about waivers right now. And so I'm going to ask the city attorney and staff to help define that. In granting a waiver or not granting a waiver, literally my understanding, and I'll look for staff to correct me if I get this wrong, is that unless, let's see, if we must grant a waiver that is requested certainly if it precludes the achieving the density requested by the developer. So in this case, the portion of the encroachment into the steep slope is right in the middle. The portion that they're encroaching into, the excess portion, is in the middle of the project area. And if we took that out, the question on the table is, has there been any evidence, I guess it would be substantive evidence, that shows that he could make it without using that encroachment. And unfortunately, the discretion, as I understand it today for waiver law, is that as long as nobody has shown it's precluded, we have to grant it. And I'll throw it back to staff to comment on the discretion and waivers.
Thank you, Councilmember Ehlers. As put up on the staff, and there's one additional finding, in order to deny a waiver, there would have to be findings based on substantial evidence of the record that there would have a specific adverse impact on the health or safety, for which there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid that specific adverse impact, or it would have an adverse impact on any real property that is listed in the California Register of Historical Places or Resources, or finally, that is contrary to state or federal law. So those are the findings that would need to be made based on evidence in the record.
Okay, so, at this point, I don't believe that I can deny the waiver for the fourth deck, although I'm reminded, going back to the Goodson project, which I was recused on, but I watched. And I remember Barbara Couts, our hired outside attorney, who's very, very, very well respected by the development industry and by HCD and by the city. And her comment to Goodson when he wanted to go up an extra 2 stories was, I remember the quote, it was something along the lines, I suppose if you asked for a 12-story unit, that you would expect that I have to approve it. And obviously, we were able to push back in that case. Why could we do it then and not, why could she make that comment then, and why does it not apply now?
Thank you, Councilmember Ehlers. So that comment was a specific sort of hypothetical, and that is not a request that's before the City Council now. It is just been a determination by staff that this would constitute one additional story under the standards in the municipal code. Here, one additional story, this is a projection that comes up a few feet. It's not obviously 12 stories. So it's a rule of reasonableness. There's nothing, and there's no specific finding that would be supportable that I'm aware of under density bonus law to deny this specific waiver.
Okay, so 2 things on that I want to go into. One, when you call it a projection, where it's a projection in height in feet, but the big difference here is it's not a projection. A projection is an intrusion into a setback area or a height limit in feet. This is a story count issue, so I think it's a different animal in that case.
Correct. This is a technical story count issue. This is not actually physically a fourth story, in the sense that we all understand as another habitable dwelling space covered by a roof. This is just a technical determination that this is a fourth story based on the staircase, the exterior staircase protrusion.
So it's a story count issue, not an intrusion into the height limit. That's my point. It's a different part of the code and a different way of counting. So and maybe or maybe not the waiver excludes that, but I don't think we can approve this as an intrusion into an appurtenance, or I forget the other words they use, above the top height limit. We're allowed so many feet, and I believe it's within that 4 or 5 feet. This is actually a height count issue, and I think the similar case that we've had to that would be the Sunshine Gardens, where the entire project was within the height limit, but the garage, because of the way we count floors, went to a 4th floor. And I think that the waiver was used and approved there. So I'm thinking, I feel like I regrettably have to agree that the waiver can be used here again, unfortunately.
Understood.
Any other comments on that one?
I could jump in if you, okay. If you don't mind, Mayor. I need further clarification on that. It's my understanding that ADA requirements do require elevator when you're over 3 stories. So we're calling this 4 stories, right? And I thought you might be going there, Bruce, but that's where I want to drill down. We've got a conflict in what we're saying we now have versus our state and federal ADA requirements. I guess I'm looking to staff to see if you can help me clarify that.
Yes, this would have to be reviewed during the building permit process by the building official, who would determine if a elevator would be required. At that time, then it would be required.
Okay, so we're not saying, yeah, we can call it 4 stories, but I just want to make sure we're clear. We're now 4 stories, even though we're not going to build, it's not going to build a full 4 stories, but we are calling it for this reason. So we will need to comply with what's required in our state standards for that.
They would, yes. And just to clarify, so this is a projection that goes above that. It's the allowance of the additional 5 feet as a projection. So it would be then both a story and height waiver.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
And, the issue of this, when you look up the definition of a story, it requires a floor and a ceiling, and essentially what we are counting as the ceiling is the inside of the stairwell, which seems like a very small bit of ceiling to be counting as a story. So it is, to me, the use of a waiver for this particular purpose is not something that I think I would normally support. The applicant is willing to do that, and you described the difficulty of denying this waiver, but I think that we should be trying to avoid waivers where we can. And in this particular case, suggesting that these stairwells create another story, to me, is not really what I think we should be doing. But they've solved the problem. I know, as was discussed in the staff report, Portofino had a similar concession. You're familiar with that. You were on the Planning Commission at the time. But the issue of waivers for this particular purpose, to me, it just doesn't seem like it's beneficial at all. And there's no question that density bonus law gives a whole bunch of power to the developers and takes away a lot of discretion from this body. So here we are. They processed a waiver for this to address the concerns that you expressed earlier, and so there we are. So going back to the list.
Going to go back to one more point that I think did not come out. I think that it is important. That is the timing of the Bankers Hill published results compared to the Goodson project and compared to this. This project proceeded past let's see, Goodson was approved before the Bankers Hill was done. It was even, not only did it get appealed twice, it was approved, or it was initially denied by the Planning Commission back on November 10th of 2021. And then the Court of Appeals reviewed and published Bankers Hill versus the City of San Diego the following year on January 7th. So that's why I think Barbara Couts could make the comment under the old Walmer 2 interpretation, and then, but I don't know if it's that cut and dried, but I'm assuming based on the timing I looked at there, that was another reason why I see a difference between the way the Goodson was denied by the Planning Commission. It was appealed to the City Council. It was denied in 2021 by the City Council because there was no Bankers Hill and the waivers could be denied. And then eventually Bankers Hill kicked in. The city got sued over Goodson, and then the city settled and had some concessions that they gained and they approved. So all a prior City Council.
Councilmember Blackwell.
Thanks. I'd like to ask just a follow-up to confirm my understanding then. So if this project, if the appeal was denied, the project approved, the fourth story waiver granted, it would still need to be reviewed, as you were saying, Anna, by building inspector to make sure it was in compliance with ADA, ingress, egress, et cetera.
That is correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we've discussed 1 and 2. Number 3 is the date the application was deemed complete versus the date Coastal Commission approved the latest City of Encinitas design standards and guidelines, and I think that was you.
I agree.
Okay.
I think the staff report covers that.
Number 4, the location of the offsite 1.92 acre mitigation bank. And we did hear that there is some consideration, but it can't be, committed to at this point. Is that what you said, Anna? Yeah.
That's correct. If they don't have the property, that we wouldn't be able to require it.
Okay.
And just the wording in the response from, that we received today from E-Corp Consulting says will be the 1.92 acres of coastal sage scrub and mixed chaparral scrub will be preserved at the Manchester Preserve pending conclusion of Section 10 United States Fish and Wildlife negotiations and approval. So I think they did that twice in there. We're saying that that's a
That is a
typo?
desire of the applicant, yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then the next was the project utilizing the sand compatibility and opportunistic use program, SCOOP. On this issue, is there no way to accelerate the analysis of these soils to see if we can get them so that we can take advantage of it?
Yeah, that's our objective and goal is to work with the wildlife agencies and the Army Corps to streamline that process. So.
Okay, and then the added conditions of approval. Okay, go ahead.
I would just say on this, here's an opportunity for the project owner to exceed and really put more public benefit into this project if we could recover the sand. So.
Okay. And then we're on to the added conditions of approval. That's also addressed in our staff report. Are there any questions or concerns?
I think it's just a question of what we can add to the conditions of approval if we can. You know, I heard a lot today, and I have 4 or 5 that I'd like to, if we go as far as approving, add to it, but I think I can wait for that discussion.
Okay, and I believe that the applicant was going to work with the neighbors as we left this, and I'm wondering, because it does say that the city has little leverage in this particular area, and has there been any progress between the neighbors and their requests and the developer?
I would have to defer to the developer. I'm not aware of discussions. And the neighbors.
I contacted them and they said that because I'm being outspoken, that they won't work with me.
Yes, sir.
The additional conditions largely came from Mr. Baxter and Ms. Cameron. We've talked with them quite a bit about them, and as I mentioned and showed in my presentation, we're accepting of those, with those as they were.
So these
relayed in
items
our-
that are listed, 1 through 5, you've
Yes.
accepted?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That brings us to, of that list, the overriding considerations, findings required in the EIR. Councilmember Ehlers.
So I think I started by saying this is really a question of the city's discretion on several points. The waivers, very little discretion. On the statement of overriding considerations, I think I read something last time, I won't reread it. It was a Supreme Court decision that basically said deciding the impact to the cost to the environment versus the benefit to the city is pretty much in our laps. And so I would ask the city attorney to give his opinion on what level of discretion do we have in making a statement of overriding considerations decision.
Thank you, Councilmember Ehlers. So under CEQA is at its heart an informational document. So it simply requires that adequate information be given to the decision maker, here the city council, for the city council to make an informed decision whether to approve or deny a project. When it comes to a statement of overriding considerations, that discretion is vested in the city council. The restrictions on that are the city council's decision must be based on substantial evidence in the record, that is evidence before it, so it can make that informed decision with all the facts in front of it.
Okay, so but basically it's up to us.
The courts will, on issues of overriding considerations, so long as there is substantial evidence in the record, the courts will defer to the discretion of the city council.
So one of the things that, and having been on, this is where the planning commission experience pays off or helps inform me, is that I know once we make a discretionary decision up here, the courts will put the weight on what we do. If we approve, they're going to put the weight on the approval. If we deny, they're going to put the weight on the denial. And it's going to be hard for the opposing party to flip it. So I just wanted to make sure the entire council understands that that discretion is ours, and we can exercise it based on the substantial evidence. So I talked last time about, I went down the justifications. I think I'm scared. I'm sounding like Scott Campbell. Scott went down very similar to what I said last time. I, so far, don't see any change. The social benefits, and I'm not going to belabor it, but this is a bunch of rectilinear boxes. The compatibility with the adjacent neighborhood is not necessarily enhancing it, certainly not. And I could go down one by one, and I have last time, so I don't want to repeat everything. Calling this neighborhood walkable, every neighborhood I've talked to anybody in town, they talk about Cardiff being walkable because they can go from their house to businesses. They can go This project is bound on one side by an urban river called a freeway, on the north side by a lagoon with one neighborhood. There are no businesses anywhere around. And probably the biggest omission in my mind is that there's no walkable path to school. That to me is by definition, this is not a walkable project. Can they walk to the other units? Absolutely. And I don't know a single boxy project, multifamily project, that it's not under that term, where you can walk to the other units. Of course you can, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get to them. Economic benefits, this is providing the absolute minimum of lower income. They are very low, so I guess it's not the absolute minimum, but they could have provided low instead of very low, but 15, that's it, out of the over 1,000 that we have to build. It provides additional new residential housing. I mean, what new residential project doesn't do that? There's nothing there. I know in the applicant attempted to address my comments previously and say, we just have to deliver something, and quite frankly, I didn't think their response helped me make a statement of findings for a statement of overriding consideration. So environmental benefits, again, the absolute minimum. They're encroaching. In 7 years of planning commission, I don't remember a single project that encroached 40% into the steep slope. Most of the ones that, if we had an encroachment beyond the allowable 10%, were 12, 13%. They were absolutely minimized. And typically they're encroached for access to get in and out of the project and not to make the project. But I understand the need to do it here, but it's a big take. And for that, in order to, again, we're weighing things, right? It's my discretionary decision, or at least one of four tonight, that the discretion is we're taking a huge chunk of steep slope, and we're taking some native plants. We're mitigating them, some off-site, some nearby, but I don't think we're given equivalent back. And so I couldn't make the findings there. So as I go down each one of these items, I cannot make the findings still today. I think I said this last time. I cannot make the finding for the statement of overriding consideration.
Deputy Mayor Lyons.
I'll just fill in on something Councilmember Ehlers didn't touch on that comes up with consideration for overriding consideration. And that is the visual quality of the project from the viewshed of the interstate. I know that Caltrans has a visual prioritization process from which it uses to classify what views are and what the view impacts are from the traveling public, which is what the city's requirement for a viewshed along the corridor was based on, if not actually, but loosely. These are standards that all agencies use, especially highway agencies. So from the perspective of looking at what transportation corridor views are, it's a little bit different than what other views are, in that the traveling public is moving at a speed, and so if you really want to drill down and assess whether there's a high visual impact to a development like this that is going to be notched into the hillside, the fact that there is this big impact of a cut into the hillside may have some other impacts that Councilmember Ehlers talked about, but the fact that it's notched into the hillside actually does improve or reduce the visual impact to the traveling public on the interstate. So what you do is you look at a professional who's doing this and assessing impacts and then mitigation would look at, well, how prominent is the new feature? What's the duration of how long someone would see it? And other components that are that can be articulated. And because this is actually built into the hillside and the height of the building itself will be mitigated because of that, and the duration of the view is also mitigated. So I would conclude, based on what a standard visual prioritization process is for a highway, that mitigation has occurred to the visual impact of this building. And I just wanted to say that because I don't think anyone in this room would agree with me on that. But I just wanted to say that because that's the professional standard of how highway view sheds would be measured. So that's just information that I wanted to share.
Councilmember Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. I would love to address this question to staff. There, on page 7 of the staff report at the bottom, when it's in the section on CEQA overriding considerations, it talks about things that were mentioned at the June 21st hearing, and it goes on to say, I'd actually just like you to explain that last sentence. Maybe you can read it and then explain a little more detail what it's meant to say.
Sure. And I think City Attorney set the stage really well. So really at its core, CEQA is about disclosure. This EIR, should you choose to certify it, is disclosing that there is one unavoidable impact. Okay, so I did hear some differing information from the audience that there were 6 impacts, and I've heard, talking about the visual considerations. The singular impact that the council will need to go on record saying, we acknowledge this is going to happen, but we still want to, proving the project outweighs that impact, is the VMT issue only. That's a significant unavoidable impact that the people living in these new units are going to be driving less, traveling less distance than the surrounding community, okay? So it's an improvement. However, the threshold that we're held to is a 15% reduction from existing average vehicle miles traveled daily per person. We can't get there, and because the site, as you said, it's not the most walkable site. There's no transit there. There aren't these other things that would get people out of their cars. There's a number of measures required of the project to try to help that even further, reduce the reliance on the vehicle. And so there's the e-bike sharing and ride sharing. We're acknowledging, I think, at most a 5% reduction from that. Even though if you look at the metrics, you can add it up and it adds up to 30% reduction. That doesn't pass the smell test here, right? So we've been very conservative in saying, look, the trip distances are what they are. The existing trip distances that we start with are based on Sandag maps that are from existing travel patterns. And that's used as a proxy for the travel distances of the new development. And then the state is saying now figure out how to make sure that all those trips associated with the new development are 15% shorter than everyone surrounding in the community. Couldn't quite get there with this project, but it will be shorter trips than all the surrounding communities. So I think it's an important issue because that is what you are going on record as a council saying, for CEQA purposes only, if we certify this EIR, we acknowledge that in approving this project, people are not going to be traveling the shortest distances possible. We can't get there.
That's helpful, but I think I was really going after that last paragraph in that on page 7.
Yeah, so getting back to that, I'm sorry.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
So it only takes one reason, okay? So you don't need social, economic, technological, any host of others. So what I would say, if there is one reason that you decide this is still worthwhile to approve, that be the reason. You could go through those, we could pull it up on the screen, and if you like, some of those issues about the walkable the community, you could strike that for the record. It could just be we are providing needed housing to meet our RENA requirements. It's a simple statement.
Yep. Okay. I'm sorry. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and so, I think that's important. I get that this statement of overriding consideration, these 2 points, 3 points, difficult for me to be able to make those findings as well. So essentially what I was looking to do is to wordsmith and to figure out, what is the minimum we can say and have a statement of overriding considerations. And honestly, I've been at this for 10 years plus, and by far the most difficult thing we've done is become compliant with our housing element law. And it has been a very painful process. There was Measure T, and most of those sites, people hated the idea that that was going to be, their neighborhood was going to be impacted in that way. It didn't pass a vote. There was Measure U, and once again, those sites were just a knockdown, drag-out fight. Everybody that had a site near their neighborhood was here arguing that we should take that site off of the map. And ultimately, that failed a vote, but a judge ordered us to comply with state law, to ignore the voters and to comply with state law, and we did that. And it's been very painful, very difficult, I acknowledge your reasons for being here to oppose this project are real. I feel it, I understand it, but in the end, we're up against state housing law, Housing Accountability Act. And so, as I look at this project, within the four corners of the law, I don't know how we can deny it. And so the next question is, how do we get to a statement of overriding considerations that we can all live with? And I am inclined to just point to state housing law and just say, you could go back. It's referenced in a couple of these. The project would provide at least the minimum number of units, goals of the adopted City of Encinitas housing element update. And I don't believe that while minimizing environmental effects and protecting surrounding natural and aesthetic resources, I think that with the steep slope waiver, it's hard to say that. So I would scratch that, clause in that sentence. The project would preserve the vegetated habitat on 4.95 acre parcel located adjacent to the north of the development. I think that mitigation is real and helpful. I do see that as beneficial. 3, I can't go there either. So environmental benefits 1 and 2 with the strike of while minimizing environmental effects. Economic benefits, people will be able to buy homes that are more affordable than single family homes. And so I think I agree with number 1. Number 2, the project would provide additional new residential housing opportunities within the Encinitas community, thereby addressing those 2 I can live with. And I'm interested in what my colleagues would be willing to consider. Social benefits, both 1 and 2, I don't like. So would that meet the letter of the law under CEQA? Okay.
Yes.
So, thoughts? Oh, yes, Councilmember Ehlers.
So I'm going to go back to other examples, and I know the applicant had problem with me citing that last time and really didn't give any sort of substantive argument why it didn't apply. So I'm going to go back and go, Home Depot, we set aside 75% of that lot as open space, which was not required. There was a lot of steep slope in there. There was a flat bean field right on the corner, very high value land, right on the corner of El Camino and Liebenhain Road. Fox Point Farms, more recently, December 17, 2020. It increased the average daily trips by 1,600, almost 1,700, but it was 5 acres, a long-term preservation of ag land, something that is all through our general plan, preserving ag. It added to the trail system. It kept the buildings near the high-traffic roads at 2 stories. So it really tried to fit in the aesthetic, and I'd actually call that project walkable, because you can at least walk across the street to the golf course, and you could even technically go down the hill to stores. It's much more walkable than this, and if you look at the trails in and around the project, over around the ag land, very walkable. It's walkable all the way to Indian Head Canyon. So, I look at what we did for a statement of overriding consideration, and I don't see the reason that this should be just, Fox Point Farms was a housing element. Same requirement here. But that wasn't enough to do it there, at least in my mind, when it came through Planning Commission. So I continue to say no. I agree with all of the ones that Mayor Kranz suggested we strike. I'm still not there that just making the housing element or supplying 15 very low income units for the housing element is not sufficient for me to make those findings. If this project was more walkable, maybe it provided a trail that served the neighborhood and the project and took people off of Plato, that would be a big step in the right direction. And it would make it, I could almost call it walkable at that point. But right now, I'm still a no.
Deputy Mayor Lyons.
Thank you. I'm just trying to thread a needle here, like maybe we all are, in that we want some precise language. And I want to go back to our environmental consultant on the comments you made about VMT. First, that's where I want to go first. Is there any, this is me needing to learn about VMT and how you assess it. Is there any benefit to improving walkability, improving the roadway in this vicinity or things like that to this where, yes, you're nodding
Sure,
already?
yeah, there is. I was going to let you finish your comment.
You could jump in.
Yes, as a matter of fact, and there's an agency, and it's called the California Air Pollution Control Association, all the officers of the air pollution districts, and they've come up with a menu of a whole list of items, and that's how we go through the process of assigning point reductions to vehicle miles traveled. And so having sidewalks, having high-density development, just those kind of basic parameters get you credits, so to speak, off of your VMT. Higher density development, lower vehicle miles traveled, sidewalks, provision of sidewalks, right? But those are very minimal reductions, and at a certain point, you just have diminishing returns. And it kind of goes back to my comment about the smell test. You can't say we're going to have sidewalks, we're going to have bikes, we're going to have bike lockers, and list, more things, and we're not going to have any miles traveled anymore. At a certain point, it's kind of a breaking point. And if you look at this project site and the environment that it's in, the road network, the bike facilities, et cetera, you can't get there. So yeah, all of those things are considered, but they just don't add up to the 15% reduction from status quo that the state says you need to meet in order to confirm that you don't have an impact to VMT.
Sorry to be so basic on my question, but what kinds of things would have a better impact on that?
Well, gosh, I mean, if there was a high, if there's a high volume transit corridor there, if there's bus stops right out front, that you get a very high reduction, similar things in that vein.
So I'm just concerned, I just have a remaining concern about going on the record of saying that we're okay with not meeting VMT. And I think you were saying, and I've heard my colleagues also imply that, that sets a post that says we're okay with that. And so, I don't know, it's a record of a decision that we've said we're okay with that. And as a community, I think that's a really important thing. We've got mobility so important to us, safety so important to us. So I don't know if my colleagues might have some suggestions or even staff about how we could thread this needle to have future objectives to reducing the impact that on the VMT here. I know that's a weird, kind of broad comment, but
yeah, and for the record too, I mean, compared to other developments in the city, it's the same issue, and it's the same issue beyond the city and throughout the state. being a practitioner, CEQA practitioner that I am, and having been directed, numerous EIRs throughout the state, this is not unique to the city of Encinitas. So it is very common practice that we're mitigating everything that we can for a project, but that VMT issue is frustrating.
Yeah, I just will conclude by saying I know that I'm really concerned with our mobility and improving it across our whole city. So to feel like we're not making enough progress, we're looking at that. We want to improve it. We're, as Kathleen said earlier, we're having meetings to figure out how to be better at this. So I guess we're just not there yet. I'm wanting to be there.
And it's semantics maybe, but you're not necessarily on the record saying, we're okay with this, we approve of this. You're acknowledging it, and you're saying, we acknowledge that this is an impact and we can't meet that threshold for VMT, but we are still going to approve this project because of A, B, or C.
Thank you.
And to follow up on that, it sounded like you said that there are and we could create paths all around, up and down, CIPs this, and access to walk to Lacoste Avenue, and it just wouldn't add up to eliminate this unmitigable issue of VMT.
That's correct. Yeah, you have diminishing returns at a certain point. There's only so many things you can do.
Okay. Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, did we, going back to the idea of having a better path to school, that seems like many of the vehicle trips out of this kind of high-density development would be to school twice a day. Do we have any idea what kind of assumption in the number of vehicle miles traveled are being generated from car trips, and that if something about this project helped mitigate that significantly, would it be a significant reduction in the vehicle miles traveled to get 90% of the school vehicle miles traveled walking instead?
Yeah, I don't know that would make a difference. I will say, we do have the traffic consultant that prepared the study is here, I know, so he can speak to some of those particulars. But you do have, you have trip generation, which is separate. It's a part of the VMT. But so this, with the number of units here, we have, I think it's 894 daily trips all told, and 80 of those during rush hour. So you have short trips going to school back and forth in the morning and the afternoon, maybe. And then you have the additional trips. You also have delivery vehicles coming and repair vehicles coming to the site. Those are included. So that trip to Capri or what have you, less than a mile, or so. So I don't think it's going to impact it that much. The number right now is approximately 24 miles per day that Sandag prescribes as how much each of us are driving in this city on average every day. And so you have to get that number down closer to 16 to not have this impact that we've been discussing, and it's a reduction.
I'd like to ask the city attorney a question. Is it possible to make a decision on the appeal and save the certification of the EIR until after we have our conversation about the easement?
I would recommend against that because you're approving the project itself, which is on appeal, correct? The Planning Commission approved the EIR subject to City Council ratification. It was appealed to City Council. Now is a decision on the appeal itself. I mean, in theory, the council could defer that condition till the determination on the granting or denying the easement, but I would recommend just making a decision on the EIR tonight.
Well, I think one of the reasons why I brought it up is because the statement of overriding consideration, the public benefits, the associated with the development of this site could, be a longer list and more benefits as a result of the next conversation if this appeal is denied. So I recognize your preference and appreciate that. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, whether that makes any difference.
If I may, I just wanted to address Deputy Mayor's comments about the VMTs and making overriding considerations. The city has made overriding considerations for VMTs specifically for Fox Point Farms and Maria Village project. I
Okay.
just want to
Thanks
state
for that reminder.
Okay, so no more requests to speak. I think I'm gonna, let's look at this statement of overriding consideration, and I think Councilmember Ehlers has said he's still not on board with the edits that I had previously suggested, but I'm going to make a motion that we deny the appeal and make a statement of overriding considerations that consists of the economic benefits as listed, number 1 and number 2, and the environmental benefits would be number 1, and then strike while minimizing environmental effects and protecting surrounding natural and aesthetic resources. And number 2, and no number 3. So those 2 items in economic benefits and environmental benefits. Councilmember Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. I'm sitting here in very mixed feelings. In truth, I think, I do support development that adds more affordable housing to our city. But I've listened to all these neighbors, and this project is not a great project from their perspective, and it's clear. Then I go back and say it's a density housing bonus project. I know there are limitations on what the city can do with respect to that, and I want us to respect those relevant laws. But I do want to know if it's the right time to talk about the conditions, right? Because the only one that's listed is about the easement. So maybe I could ask staff to just go through a few that I've been thinking of. I think Councilmember Ehlers has some as well, but it's just good for me to understand what the boundaries are there. So would that be okay?
Are you willing to second the motion for discussion purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
So with respect to, some are listed in the staff report. For example, the site soil study to evaluate whether the removed soil can be used as part of the sand or the scoop project. That is something we could add as a condition of approval, right? The traffic mitigation fees, which the applicant has already talked about, we could consider applying those to pending or future projects in the vicinity of this development project, correct? We might need to define vicinity later. Maybe that's something staff could consider, but we could put that as a condition of approval.
Yes, the council has the authority to do that.
Thanks. There was, in June 21st, we talked about some issues Caltrans had raised about stormwater discharge. That could be, I think back in the June 21st staff report, we said that could be a condition of approval, that the applicant work with Caltrans on that one. And then we also could talk about the frontage road improvements. In this staff report for tonight, there was talk about how our engineering department had looked at parking along Perea Street, adding some there, and a right turn lane heading westbound on Plato Place onto Perea's. So again, we could talk, there is some frontage improvements that are part of the project, but these are additional ones we could.
Yes.
Okay. The last question I have is the offsite mitigation. Can we condition that to be in the boundaries of the city? That 1.92 acres that
There's a possibility that nothing would be available, so that would be a difficult thing to do. You can state your preference for the record.
Got it. And then some comments were raised about short-term rentals, and I'm just unclear what value there. I mean, I know we have an ordinance on it, but could you speak as whether that could be part of the conditions or how we might incorporate that?
Currently, our code does not allow for short-term rentals in multifamily, so this would not be allowed to do that.
Great, thanks. Okay, with that, I think I'm got my questions answered, so I'll pause.
So the conditions for the right turn lane have been added to the motion?
Yeah, I mean, yes, okay, so maybe I should conclude my thought. Based on what I just heard from staff, I would like to see the site soil study regarding scoop, that we come up with some language to have those traffic mitigation fees directed to projects pending or future in the vicinity of this housing development, that the Caltrans issue is resolved between the applicant and Caltrans, and then the frontage road, additional frontage road improvements. I think the last thing I'd say is just adding a preference for the off-site mitigation to be within the boundaries of the city of Encinitas.
Okay, and that couldn't be conditioned, but it could be stated as a preference? Okay.
Yes, and if I may, there were other conditions. One, the voluntary conditions with the neighbors, as well as the requested modifications as well.
Correct, and yes, I should be clear, I support those.
Councilmember Ehlers.
I think you caught up on most of that. If we're going to approve it, or if the majority approves it, I just wanted to make sure, and I think you got everything I had on my list, so.
Okay, you're good with your second still, Councilmember Blackwell?
Yes, I am.
All right. Do you need any clarification?
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, I just had one clarification. There was the last condition of approval that was between the neighbors. There was a statement, I can try to pull it up, where they would encourage the city to work on working with Caltrans. I'm not sure if you guys were supportive of, if the council was supportive of that last one as well.
I think you mentioned that, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that one was the condition that was in the.
And I think that
It's a different one.
Yeah.
I'll pull it up.
I think, are we referring to the Caltrans runoff? That'll be required by Caltrans? No, what?
No, it's a different one. It was in, I believe, attachment 4. Let me pull it up.
I think I know which one you're talking about. It has to do with the applicant put forward one. Is that correct?
That's correct. I just put it up on the screen. It's the very last one.
Yeah, that, I'm not inclined to include that in the conditions. I think we understand we will do this work. I don't know that putting it in here is something I'd support.
And I'm okay with the condition of the use of mitigation monies here. I have strongly advocated for all of these housing element projects, mitigation money to go to the neighborhoods that they are located in. And I think that, quite frankly, that's a political body, something that we need to commit to. I don't know that it needs a vote, but I don't doubt that as each of these projects move forward, we're going to address it. I think it was former Mayor Cameron that talked about get cracking on the CIPs, and we've started that process. There was, Kathleen mentioned the meeting last night, and we're going to continue having those meetings and advance the issues related to the impacts of these housing element projects. So did that clarify what needed to be clarified?
Yeah, so we have the motion by Mayor Kranz, the friendly amendment by Councilmember Blackwell.
Yep.
All right, and I just wanted to be clear, on the proposed new conditions, is it just 1 through 4 or 1 through 5? Did you want to leave in the last one, which was for La Costa Avenue? Applicant shall encourage City of Encinitas?
Yes, to
It's staying in?
4.
I think we have differing members, so maybe on that one you.
So the 5 that are on our screen, do we want all 5 of them? I thought we decided the 5th one was not.
Yes, that's what I was recommending. 1 through 4 shown on the screen here would be conditions of approval, but not the 5th.
Perfect, I just wanted to clarify it. Thank you.
May I jump in? You also added some additional ones other than these.
Correct, I did, yes. And if I need to clarify those, it was the site soil study related to Scoop, the traffic mitigation fees being directed to the vicinity of this housing development project, the applicant coordinating with Caltrans on the stormwater discharge impacts, and then the additional frontage road improvements, which is the parking along Piraeus and a right turn lane heading westbound from Plato Place onto Piraeus. And the preference for the off-site mitigation to be in the city of Encinitas.
You ready to vote?
And the neighbors list too, was there also the, I'm just checking my checklist.
I do. I think we should just be clear. Could you read back everything that we've got? This is a long list now, isn't it? But I think for everyone's sake, it's probably good at this hour.
I got it on my notes. Okay. So the motion was to deny the appeal, and then moving to the overriding, what are they called? The overriding considerations was, under economic benefits, was number 1 and 2, as written on page 3 of 8 of the agenda report. And then number 1, under environmental benefits, number 1, striking at the end while minimizing environmental effects and protecting surrounding natural aesthetic resources. So it would end right after housing element update. And then that also includes number 2 under environmental benefits. And then moving to the new conditions was the conditions that were on the screen. So it was the project's HOA shall include language in its CCNRs indicating that barbecue charcoal grills are not allowed on the rooftop decks. The next one is the project's HOA shall include language in its CCNRs indicating the maximum number of people allowed on the rooftop decks, and this occupancy number shall be posted on the rooftop decks. The next one is the project's HOA shall include language in its CCNRs indicating that residents and their guests are not allowed to park vehicles on adjacent residential neighborhood streets. The next is the 15 deed-restricted homes at Piraeus Point shall be sold rather than rented to qualified home buyers. And then the inclusion of the site soil study related to Scoop. The traffic mitigation fees shall to be used in the vicinity of the project. The applicant to work with Caltrans regarding the stormwater discharge issue. Additional frontage road improvements. Off-site mitigation, the preference for off-site mitigation within the city. And that, I think, covers it.
If I may, there were the modifications that the applicant had requested regarding the fire mitigation, the fire approving. So there are those as well. And then I can pull them up so that you can take a look at them. And then just stating that if the recommendation is for approving the project and then certifying the EIR as amended, per the amendments that had occurred, adopting the CEQA findings of fact and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and then adopting the statement of overriding considerations. Just making sure that that is what the motion is. Okay. And then I can show the modifications.
And are those the ones on it that are listed on page 1 of 2 of attachment 4? So fire 12.
Yes.
SOC page 14. SO3 page 33, and FEIR mitigation measure. But yes.
Yes.
So it includes all
And-
those?
And to be clear, the current resolution already has the condition of approval about the easement, so that stays.
Actually, I think we're adding that. We're adding that. We're changing the condition of approval as per the staff report.
That's correct, yes.
To,
I think you guys are saying the same
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
Are you ready to vote? Motion carries with Councilmember Ayers voting no and Councilmember Hensy absent.
Okay, thank you all. I know that it's painful, and I appreciate that. With that, we're going to skip reports tonight, and we're going to adjourn the meeting. Whew.